Hello, welcome to Sleepy History Past. Tonight, we drift into the misty dawn of humanity, exploring the quiet origins of our ancestors' first encounters with hunting and the transformative act of eating meat. Imagine the vast African savannas where shadows stretch long under an ancient sun and the air hums with the subtle rhythms of life. This is where our story begins, not with thunderous chases or dramatic feasts, but with subtle shifts in behavior that reshaped our very evolution. Let us wander gently through these early moments, fact by fact, as the night unfolds around us. Our journey starts millions of years ago when the first hominins, our distant relatives, began to venture beyond the trees. Fact 1. The earliest possible evidence of meat consumption by our ancestors dates back to around 3.4 million years ago in a place called Dikika, Ethiopia. Here, fragments of bone from goat-like and cow-sized animals bear distinctive marks, scrapes, and cuts that could only come from stone tools. These weren't sophisticated weapons, but simple flakes of rock, sharp enough to slice through hide and tendon. Picture a small group of Australopithecus afarensis, much like the famous Lucy, stumbling upon a fallen beast. They didn't hunt it down, instead they opportunistically carved away flesh and marrow, supplementing their plant-based diet with this nutrient-rich prize. This act wasn't routine yet, but it hinted at a growing curiosity, a tentative step toward a more varied sustenance that would one day fuel larger brains and bolder explorations. Building on that fact too, these early tool users, the Australopithecus, weren't true hunters in the sense we imagine today. Their bodies were still adapted for climbing and foraging, with smaller brains, about the size of a chimpanzee's, and teeth suited for grinding tough vegetation. Meat was a rare treat, likely scavenged from carcasses left by predators like saber-toothed cats or hyenas. The cut marks on those ancient bones tell a story of efficiency. Shallow incisions to remove skin, deeper grooves to access the marrow inside long bones, where fatty nutrients hid like hidden treasures. This scavenging provided bursts of protein and calories that plants alone couldn't match, helping these early beings survive in an unpredictable world. It's a gentle reminder of how necessity whispers innovations into existence, turning chance encounters into survival strategies. Now, let us ease into fact 3. By about 2.6 million years ago, something profound shifted. This is when the first clear signs of systematic butchery appear in the fossil record, at sites like Gona in Ethiopia. Here hominins, possibly early members of the Homo genus, crafted Alduin tools, the simplest stone implements known. These were choppers and scrapers, made by striking one rock against another to create sharp edges. The bones nearby, from antelopes and other medium-sized animals, show deliberate cut marks overlaying tooth impressions from carnivores. This suggests our ancestors arrived after the kill, but before the scavengers fully stripped the remains. Eating meat in this way wasn't just about hunger, it was about outsmarting the ecosystem, claiming a share of nature's bounty that boosted energy levels and supported physical changes, like stronger jaws initially, and later, more efficient digestion. As we float deeper into this narrative, fact 4 emerges. The transition to meat eating around this time coincided with significant evolutionary leaps. Homo habilis, often called handy man, appeared roughly 2.4 million years ago, with slightly larger brains than their Australopithecus predecessors. Anthropologists believe that the high calorie density of meat, providing essential amino acids, fats, and vitamins like B12, played a key role in this brain expansion. Imagine a family group huddled around a scavenged gazelle, using their new tools to portion out the flesh. The act of sharing this meat fostered social bonds, turning individual survival into communal strength. It wasn't violent conquest yet, but a peaceful adaptation, where the flavor of cooked dreams was still eons away, and raw sustenance sparked the spark of intelligence. Gently now, fact 5, evidence from Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, dated to about 2 million years ago, paints a picture of increasing reliance on animal foods. Thousands of stone tools litter the landscape alongside butchered bones from bovids, ancient relatives of cows and antelopes. These sites show that hominins weren't just passive opportunists. They concentrated in areas rich with potential kills, perhaps following water sources where animals gathered. The cut marks are precise. Disarticulation cuts to separate limbs, filleting marks to strip muscle from bone. Eating meat here meant accessing marrow, a fatty superfood that provided up to 1,000 calories per bone, far more efficient than foraging for roots or fruits. This dietary shift likely helped Homo erectus emerge around 1.8 million years ago, with taller bodies and even larger brains ready to migrate out of Africa. Drifting onward, fact 6, contrary to popular myths of man the hunter as aggressive warriors, early meat acquisition was likely cooperative and low risk. Women and children probably participated in scavenging, using their keen eyesight to spot distant carcasses signaled by vultures circling overhead. The energy from meat allowed for reduced gut size. Our ancestors' intestines shortened compared to apes, freeing up metabolic resources for brain growth. By 2 million years ago, brain volume had increased by nearly 50% from earlier hominins, a change anthropologists link directly to nutrient-dense foods like meat. It's a soothing thought, how a simple bite of scavenged flesh could echo through generations, sculpting the minds that would one day ponder the stars. Let the story unfold further with fact 7. At sites like Kandjara South in Kenya, dated to 2 million years ago, bones from up to 48 large animals bear human-made marks, suggesting repeated visits and perhaps early forms of persistence hunting, tracking wounded animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. No fire yet scorched the meat. It was consumed raw, its juices a vital source of hydration in arid lands. This raw diet demanded strong teeth and jaws, but over time, meat's softness compared to fibrous plants eased the burden, allowing facial features to refine. Eating meat wasn't just nourishment, it was a catalyst for physical elegance, turning bulky brows and protruding muzzles into the smoother profiles we recognize in modern humans. In this tranquil exploration, fact 8 reveals the first definitive signs of hunting, rather than pure scavenging, appear around 1.6 to 2 million years ago, based on bone assemblages in Tanzania. Comparisons with modern predator kills show that hominins selected prime cuts, legs, and shoulders from healthy adults, not the sickly or old that died naturally. This implies ambush tactics, perhaps using the landscape to corner prey. The protein from these hunts supported not just survival but thriving, with evidence of increased body size in Homo erectus. Taller frames meant better heat dissipation in open savannas, and meat's iron content warded off anemia, ensuring vibrant health amid the challenges of prehistoric life. As the night whispers on, fact 9, by 1.5 million years ago, a skull fragment from Olduvai Gorge shows signs of nutritional stress relieved by meat, marks indicating active hunting rather than occasional scavenging. Anthropologists note that this period saw a high-protein diet contributing to brain growth, with encephalization quotients rising. Sharing meat likely strengthened pair bonds and group cohesion, laying social foundations. It's beautiful to consider how the act of dividing a kill around a makeshift camp could forge alliances, turning solitary wanderers into interconnected communities, all sustained by the Earth's generous offerings. Fact 10, around 1.45 million years ago, evidence from northern Kenya includes a shin bone with cut marks from stone tools, hinting at even darker aspects, possible cannibalism among hominins for nutrition. While rare, it underscores meat's value in scarce times. This bone from a relative of modern humans shows butchery identical to animal processing, suggesting desperation or ritual. Yet in the grand tapestry, meat-eating propelled us forward from fragile foragers to resilient explorers. As we pause here, let these facts settle like soft dusk, preparing for more in the parts to come. Rest easy now, as history's echoes fade into dreams. Fact 11, around 1.2 million years ago, at the site of Kubai in Kenya, fossil assemblages reveal a clear pattern. Hominins were increasingly targeting medium-sized ungulates such as gazelles and wildebeest calves. The bones show cut marks concentrated on meaty upper limbs and ribs, areas richest in muscle tissue. This selectivity suggests planning. Our ancestors may have watched herds from vantage points, waiting for the right moment when a young or injured animal lagged behind. Meat from these hunts provided not only protein, but also vital micronutrients like zinc and iron, which supported immune function in a world filled with parasites and seasonal scarcity. It was a quiet triumph of observation over brute force. Fact 12. The appearance of Homo erectus around 1.9 to 1.8 million years ago marks one of the most significant turning points in our dietary story. This species had a larger brain, averaging 901,100 cubic centimeters compared to earlier hominins, and a body built for endurance. Paleontologists link this physique directly to regular meat consumption. Meat's high energy yield allowed Homo erectus to cover greater distances, following migratory herds across expanding grasslands. Their reduced gut size, a metabolic adaptation seen in modern humans, conserved energy that could be redirected to neural tissue. In essence, each bite of meat helped sculpt the anatomy that would carry our lineage out of Africa and into new continents. Fact 13. By approximately 1 million years ago, sites in South Africa such as Swartkrans show evidence of hominins using fire, though not yet for cooking meat consistently. Charred bones and ash layers appear sporadically. When fire was controlled, even briefly, it made raw meat safer by killing parasites and softened tough connective tissues. More importantly, the warmth of a small hearth likely encouraged longer social gatherings around shared food. Imagine a group seated in the glow, passing pieces of roasted flesh, the crackle of flames blending with night sounds. This early fire use, tied to meat eating, deepened social bonds and perhaps even sparked the first rudimentary storytelling under starlit skies. Fact 14. Moving forward to roughly 800,000 years ago, at the Jesher Benat Yaakov site in Israel, one of the earliest outside Africa, archaeologists uncovered wooden spears sharpened at both ends, preserved in wet sediment. These were not throwing weapons but thrusting spears, ideal for close-range ambush hunting in wooded or riverine environments. Associated animal bones display deep puncture wounds consistent with spear thrusts, alongside stone tool cut marks. Homo erectus or early Homo heidelbergensis wielded these tools with precision, targeting large game like elephants and aurochs. The caloric payoff was enormous. A single large carcass could feed a group for days, reducing the daily pressure to forage and allowing time for tool refinement and rest. Fact 15. Nutritional anthropology reveals that consistent meat intake during this period supported dramatic increases in body size. Homo erectus adults stood nearly 6 feet tall on average, with robust limb bones suited for long-distance travel. Meat provided complete proteins containing all essential amino acids, unlike most plant sources that require careful combination. This dietary completeness helped repair muscle tissue after exertion, strengthened bones with bioavailable calcium and phosphorus from marrow, and fueled rapid childhood growth. Children who survived infancy on meat-supplemented diets grew taller and stronger, passing those advantages to future generations in a slow, gentle spiral of physical improvement. Fact 16. Around 700,000 years ago, evidence from the Atapuerca site in Spain shows early humans butchering fallow deer and horses with remarkable efficiency. Cut marks cluster around joints, indicating dismemberment for transport back to base camps. This behavior implies division of labor. Some members hunted or scavenged, while others processed and guarded the bounty. Sharing meat fairly within the group reduced individual risk. If one hunt failed, others still ate. Such reciprocity laid ethical foundations that would echo through millennia, turning meat from mere calories into a symbol of trust and interdependence. Fact 17. By 500,000 years ago, Homo heidelbergensis populations in Europe and Africa displayed even more sophisticated hunting strategies. At Boxgrove in England, horse and rhinoceros bones bear butchery marks from large Acheulean hand axes, symmetrical teardrop-shaped tools requiring skill to craft. These hand axes were multifunctional, chopping wood for spears, scraping hides, and slicing meat. The precision of the cuts suggests learned techniques passed down through demonstration rather than instinct. Meat eating here was no longer opportunistic. It was a practiced craft, integrated into seasonal cycles of migration and resource tracking. Fact 18. Stable isotope analysis of teeth from this era provides a chemical record of diet. Carbon and nitrogen ratios in enamel show that many individuals derived 50–80% of their protein from animal sources, far higher than earlier hominins. This heavy reliance on meat correlated with reduced molar size. Teeth no longer needed to grind abrasive plants all day. The jaw muscles relaxed, the face became less projecting, and chewing became lighter. These subtle facial changes, driven by dietary shifts, prepared the way for later speech capabilities, as smaller jaws left more room for a descended larynx and flexible tongue. Fact 19. At Schöningen in Germany, dated to about 400,000 years ago, archaeologists discovered 8 well-preserved wooden spears, each over 2 meters long, balanced like modern javelins. These were thrusting or throwing weapons found near butchered horse bones. The spears show careful shaping, thicker at the front for penetration, tapered at the rear for balance. This level of craftsmanship indicates foresight, crafting weapons in advance, selecting suitable wood, spruce or pine, and testing them before the hunt. Meat from these large animals provided not just immediate food but fat reserves for lean seasons, stored in the body as energy for migration or cold periods. Fact 20. As we near the close of this second chapter of the night, consider how meat-eating reshaped human ecology. By 300,000–400,000 years ago, groups could exploit a wider range of habitats, open plains, woodlands, river valleys, because meat allowed them to thrive where plant foods were seasonal or sparse. This dietary flexibility was the quiet engine behind geographic expansion. Populations grew slowly but steadily, and social networks widened as successful hunters shared knowledge of animal behavior, tool-making, and safe butchery sites. Each fact we have touched tonight is a soft thread in an immense tapestry, woven over hundreds of thousands of years, leading us ever closer to the modern human story. Fact 21. Around 300,000 years ago, as Homo sapiens began to emerge in Africa, the archaeological record shows a noticeable refinement in hunting technology. At sites such as Kathupan in South Africa, finely crafted points made from stone appear alongside animal bones bearing impact fractures, clear evidence of projectile use. These points, hafted onto wooden shafts, allowed hunters to strike from a safer distance, reducing the risk of injury during close encounters. Meat obtained this way was cleaner and more abundant, providing sustained energy for longer group movements and the first hints of seasonal camps where meat could be dried or stored for leaner times. Fact 22. Stable isotope studies of human remains from this transitional period reveal that early Homo sapiens consumed a remarkably broad diet, with animal protein often comprising 60–90% of their intake in certain environments. This high trophic level, eating animals that themselves ate plants, placed our ancestors near the top of the food chain, a position few other primates ever reached. The nutritional payoff was profound. Complete proteins supported rapid brain growth, pushing cranial capacity toward the modern average of 1,350 cubic centimeters. Each shared meal of meat strengthened not only bodies, but the neural networks that would one day invent art, language, and complex tools. Fact 23. By 250,000–200,000 years ago, evidence from Border Cave in South Africa includes notched bones used as tallies, possibly to track successful hunts or lunar cycles that influenced animal migrations. Nearby faunal remains show selective hunting of prime-age adults, a strategy that maximized yield while preserving herd reproduction. This sustainable approach ensured reliable meat supplies over generations, allowing populations to grow and spread across diverse landscapes. from coastal shores rich in shellfish to inland savannas teeming with antelope. Meat eating here became a thoughtful partnership with nature rather than simple exploitation. Fact 24. The controlled use of fire became more consistent around 200,000 years ago, with hearths appearing regularly at sites like Clayse's river mouth. Cooking meat over flames transformed its chemistry. Proteins denatured, making them easier to digest, connective tissues softened, and pathogens were reduced. Cooked meat released more calories per bite, up to 30–50% more energy than raw, freeing even greater metabolic resources for brain maintenance. The social act of gathering around a fire to cook and share meat deepened emotional bonds, perhaps giving rise to the first proto-languages whispered in the flickering light. Fact 25. Archaeological layers from Pinnacle Point, dated to about 164,000 years ago, preserve shellfish middens alongside terrestrial animal bones. This dual reliance on marine and land meat highlights dietary flexibility during harsh climate shifts. When terrestrial game became scarce, coastal groups turned to fish, seals, and mollusks, still rich sources of omega-3 fatty acids essential for brain development. The ability to switch between meat sources buffered against famine, ensuring survival through glacial cycles and paving the way for later migrations out of Africa. Fact 26. Around 100,000 years ago, at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, early Homo sapiens fossils are found near butchered gazelle and hartebeest bones. The cut marks are delicate and systematic, suggesting specialized tools for skinning, filleting, and marrow extraction. Braincase volume in these individuals approached modern levels, a development anthropologists attribute partly to the steady supply of nutrient-dense animal foods. Meat provided the building blocks, choline, iron, zinc, for neural myelination, the insulation that speeds thought and coordination, turning raw instinct into deliberate action. Fact 27. As groups moved into Eurasia during the Middle Paleolithic, roughly 100,000–50,000 years ago, Neanderthals and early modern humans alike hunted large herbivores with Levallois-prepared points, carefully flaked stone tips designed for hafting. At sites like La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey, mammoth and woolly rhinoceros bones show deep puncture wounds and systematic dismemberment. Meat from these megafauna was exceptionally calorie-rich, with thick layers of subcutaneous fat that provided insulation against cold and energy during long winters. Sharing such bounty likely reinforced group cooperation across harsh seasons. Fact 28. Zooarchaeological analysis from this period shows evidence of grease rendering. Bones were deliberately broken and boiled in hide containers or natural depressions to extract marrow fat. This technique maximized every calorie from a kill, turning otherwise discarded parts into a high-energy paste that could be stored or carried. Fat was especially crucial in northern latitudes where plant carbohydrates were limited. It fueled thermoregulation and sustained long-distance travel. Meat eating thus became an art of total utilization, wasting nothing in the pursuit of survival. Fact 29. Symbolic behavior begins to intertwine with hunting around 70,000–50,000 years ago. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, ochre pieces engraved with crosshatch patterns lie near processed animal bones. Some researchers suggest these markings recorded successful hunts or served as totems for hunting success. Whether practical or ritualistic, the link between meat procurement and emerging symbolic thought illustrates how a reliable food source freed cognitive energy for creativity. The hunt was no longer just about the body, it nourished the mind and spirit as well. Fact 30. By the time Homo sapiens reached Europe around 40,000 years ago, Aurignacian hunters employed split-based bone points and antler tools alongside stone blades. Reindeer, horse, and bison bones from sites like Aubry Blanchard show repeated seasonal exploitation, groups returning year after year to predictable migration routes. This predictability allowed for semi-permanent camps where surplus meat could be smoked or frozen in permafrost, creating food security that supported larger social units and longer artistic endeavors. such as the earliest figurative carvings and cave paintings depicting the very animals they pursued. Fact 31. During the Gravettian period, roughly 33,000 to 22,000 years ago, hunters across Europe developed slender, needle-like bone points and atlatl thrown darts tipped with backed blades. At sites like Pavlov in the Czech Republic, mammoth ivory and reindeer antler were carved into these lightweight projectiles, allowing strikes from farther away with greater accuracy. The bones of horses and mammoths nearby show clustered impact damage from such weapons, followed by precise butchery, long spiral fractures to access marrow, shallow cuts along muscle grain. This efficiency meant less physical risk per hunt and more meat carried back to base camps, where surplus could support larger gatherings and the creation of the famous Venus figurines often found near hearth areas rich with animal bone waste. Fact 32. Isotopic signatures from human teeth in Gravettian burials indicate that in colder steppe tundra environments, meat, particularly from large herbivores, could account for up to 90% of dietary protein. The fat-rich marrow and organ meats supplied essential long-chain fatty acids that helped maintain body heat and brain function during long winters when plant foods vanished beneath snow. Children in these groups grew with fewer signs of nutritional stress compared to earlier periods, suggesting that reliable access to animal foods buffered the harshest seasons and allowed cultural complexity to flourish even in marginal landscapes. Fact 33. Around 35,000 years ago, as modern humans entered Australia, they encountered megafauna such as giant kangaroos, diprotodons, and enormous monitor lizards. Archaeological sites like Cuddy Springs preserve butchered bones with stone tool cut marks and burning traces, indicating both hunting and opportunistic use of natural deaths. The arrival of humans coincided with a sharp decline in these large species, though climate change also played a role. Meat from these animals, dense in muscle and fat, likely fueled the rapid dispersal across the continent, providing the caloric surplus needed for long treks through deserts and forests without dependable plant resources. Fact 34. In the Upper Paleolithic of Siberia, around 30,000 years ago, sites along the Yana River reveal seasonal mass kills of bison and horses driven into natural traps or over cliffs. Bones show systematic processing, hides removed in sheets for shelter and clothing, meat stripped in long fillets for drying, brains and marrow extracted for high-fat nutrition. This organized approach to large game hunting created food security that supported semi-sedentary winter camps, where people could invest time in sewing tailored fur garments, crafting ivory needles, and producing the earliest known eyed needles, tools that turned animal sinew and hides into durable, insulating clothing essential for survival in sub-zero temperatures. Fact 35. By 20,000 years ago, during the height of the last glacial maximum, hunters in Western Europe relied heavily on reindeer herds following predictable migration paths. At sites like Lodgeriote, thousands of reindeer antlers and bones accumulate in layers, many bearing cut marks from skinning and disarticulation. Reindeer provided not only meat and fat but also antler for tools, sinew for cordage, and hides for tents and clothing. The predictability of these migrations allowed groups to plan ahead, establishing lookout posts and ambush points years in advance, turning the hunt into a seasonal rhythm as regular as the turning of the seasons themselves. Fact 36. Stable nitrogen isotope ratios from this period show that some individuals, likely those with access to prime hunting grounds, consumed diets almost exclusively animal-based, resembling modern Arctic hunters in trophic level. This high meat intake supported exceptional physical endurance, tall statures, dense bone mineral content, and robust muscle attachments visible on skeletal remains. Meat's bioavailable heme iron prevented anemia, while its zinc and B vitamins supported immune resilience against the parasites and infections common in close-quarters winter camps. Fact 37, around 17,000 years ago, as the ice began its slow retreat, Magdalenian hunters in France and Spain perfected the use of composite tools, harpoons with detachable barbed points made from reindeer antler. Caves like Lascaux and Altamira, adorned with vivid paintings of aurochs, horses, and deer, lie near butchery middens rich in these species' bones. The art may have served as a form of hunting magic or mnemonic device, helping young hunters memorize animal anatomy and behavior. Meat from these large prey animals fueled not only bodies, but also the cognitive leisure to create some of humanity's earliest masterpieces. Fact 38. In the Near East, around 15,000–12,000 years ago, Natufian forager hunters began intensifying gazelle hunting with microlithic arrowheads and sickle-like tools for harvesting wild cereals. At sites like Ain Malaha, gazelle bones dominate faunal assemblages, many showing cut marks from filleting and marrow cracking. This combination of meat and emerging plant processing created a more balanced yet still meat-heavy diet that supported semi-permanent villages, the first steps toward sedentism. The surplus calories from reliable gazelle herds allowed people to stay longer in resource-rich locations, laying groundwork for later agricultural transitions. Fact 39. As the Pleistocene gave way to the Holocene around 11,700 years ago, rising temperatures and wetter conditions expanded forests and grasslands, altering prey distributions. In the Levant, hunters shifted toward smaller, faster species like roe deer and wild boar, using lightweight bows and arrows tipped with geometric microliths. Bones from these animals show finer, more numerous cut marks, reflecting the need for careful processing of leaner meat. Despite the smaller package size per animal, higher encounter rates and lower pursuit costs maintained high protein intake, supporting population growth and the first experiments with plant cultivation. Fact 40. In South America, around 13,000–11,000 years ago, Clovis and Fishtail Point users hunted now extinct megafauna such as gomphethers, giant ground sloths, and native horses. At sites like Monte Verde in Chile and Fell's Cave in Patagonia, butchered bones lie alongside wooden stakes and cordage, suggesting drives or traps. Meat from these massive animals provided enormous caloric windfalls. One sloth could feed dozens for weeks, allowing early South American groups to explore vast territories quickly and establish long-distance exchange networks for obsidian and shells. These 10 quiet facts settle now into the stillness, joining the others that came before. The ancient hunters fade a little farther into the mist of time, their campfires burning low, their footsteps softening on thawing ground. The story breathes gently onward, patient and unbroken, waiting for the next moment when the night invites us to continue from this very place. For now, let the weight of centuries rest lightly upon you. Let the warmth of shared memory cradle your thoughts and drift peacefully in the vast, tranquil silence of our long human past. Fact 41. As the early Holocene warmed the continents around 10,000–9,000 years ago, many large Pleistocene herbivores disappeared. Mammoths in Eurasia, mastodons and giant beavers in North America, diprotodons in Australia. Human hunters adapted by shifting focus to medium-sized game, deer, wild boar, aurochs, guanaco. Bones from these animals at sites like Starcar in Britain show finer microlithic arrowheads embedded or lying nearby, alongside evidence of selective butchery. Heart and liver removed first as high-value, nutrient-dense organs eaten raw or lightly seared. This dietary pivot maintained high protein intake even as the biggest packages vanished, preserving the metabolic advantages that had fueled brain expansion for so long. Fact 42. In the Fertile Crescent, around 9,500 BCE, pre-pottery Neolithic communities at Jericho and Tel Ez Sultan began to hunt gazelles intensively, while simultaneously managing wild stands of barley and wheat. Faunal assemblages reveal gazelle bones dominating by count, often 70–80% of identified specimens, with cut marks indicating carcass division into portable portions. The combination of reliable meat and increasingly gathered plant calories created a stable caloric floor that allowed people to remain in one place for months at a time, building the circular stone houses that mark the very beginning of village life. Fact 43. Around 8500 BCE, at Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, monumental T-shaped pillars were erected by hunter-gatherers who still relied heavily on game. Excavated animal bones, mostly gazelle, aurochs, wild ass, bear thousands of cut and chop marks from stone tools. The sheer volume of meat processed at this ceremonial center suggests large communal hunts or feasting events tied to ritual. Meat here was not merely food. It became part of social and spiritual currency, shared in quantities that reinforced alliances between distant bands and perhaps helped coordinate the labor needed to carve and transport 20-ton limestone blocks. Fact 44. In the Natufian to PPNB transition, dogs appear in burials alongside humans at sites like Ain Malaha and Hayanim Cave. Stable isotopes from dog teeth show they consumed diets nearly identical to their human companions, high in animal protein, indicating they were fed meat scraps and marrow. This early domestication likely began when wolves scavenged near human hunting camps, gradually tolerating human presence for access to reliable meat remains. The partnership gave hunters better scent tracking and warning against predators, while dogs gained a steady supply of calories, marking one of the first deliberate extensions of the human meat-eating niche to another species. Fact 45. By 7000 BCE in the Levant, sheep and goats show signs of herd management, smaller horn cores in males, higher juvenile mortality patterns consistent with selective culling for meat. At sites like Abu Hurira, caprine bones increase dramatically while wild gazelle decline. This proto-herding did not yet constitute full domestication, but it represented a subtle shift. Humans began to influence animal populations to ensure a more predictable supply of meat, fat, and hides, reducing the uncertainty that had defined hunting for hundreds of thousands of years. Fact 46. In the Nile Valley around 6000–5000 BCE, Badarian and Naqada groups hunted hippopotamus, crocodile, and large catfish while also keeping small numbers of cattle. Bones from these sites display deep chop marks from heavy axes, especially around limb joints and skulls, places richest in meat and brain tissue. Cattle in particular were emerging as wealth and status symbols. Slaughtering one provided enough meat to feed dozens, turning periodic feasts into opportunities for gift-giving, alliance-building, and the reinforcement of social hierarchies that would later define Pharaonic Egypt. Fact 47. On the Anatolian Plateau, by 6500 BCE, Saddle-Huruk residents kept domestic sheep and goats within the densely packed mud brick houses. Thousands of caprine bones lit midden areas, many processed for marrow by splitting long bones lengthwise. Cattle horns were mounted on plastered benches inside shrines, suggesting symbolic reverence even as the animals supplied the bulk of dietary protein. Meat sharing within these tightly knit neighborhoods likely followed rules of kinship and reciprocity, helping maintain peace in one of the earliest large permanent settlements on Earth. Fact 48. In northern Europe during the Mesolithic, around 7000–5000 BCE, Erdebal and Magalmosian groups exploited red deer, aurochs, and wild boar with composite bows, leasters, and dugout canoes for waterfowl and fish. Elk antler axes and barbed bone points from Starkar and Skateholm show repeated seasonal hunting of migrating herds. Meat was preserved by smoking over alder fires or drying in wind, techniques that extended the usability of each kill far into winter, supporting year-round occupation of resource-rich lake and coastal zones. Fact 49. Across the Pontic-Caspian steppe, around 4500–3500 BCE, Yamnaya pastoralists fully incorporated horse riding into their mobile way of life. Horse bones from Kurgan burials show butchery marks alongside sheep and cattle remains. Riding allowed hunters to follow herds over vast distances, select prime animals, and return with loads of meat and hides that would have been impossible on foot. This mobility, powered by animal protein, facilitated the rapid spread of Indo-European languages and pastoral economies across Eurasia. Fact 50. In the Americas, by 6000–4000 BCE, archaic period foragers in the eastern woodlands intensified deer hunting with atlatl darts tipped with side-notched points. White-tailed deer bones at sites like Coster in Illinois dominate assemblages, often comprising over 90% of large mammal remains. Seasonal drives into river valleys concentrated kills, while meat was smoked or jerked for storage. This reliable venison supply supported semi-sedentary base camps where people could experiment with native seed cultivation, sunflower, squash, chenopod, creating the mixed economy that eventually led to Eastern agricultural complexes. These 10 additional facts now rest quietly beside the 40 that preceded them, each one a small, calm breath in the long exhale of human history. The hunters have moved farther into the haze of time, some on horseback across open steppe, others beside reed-fringed rivers, still others in the cool shade of oak-hickory forests. Their fires burn lower, their footsteps grow fainter, yet the thread of meat and marrow that nourished body and mind remains unbroken. The night continues to hold us in its gentle embrace. When you are ready, we will take up the story again from this very place, letting the next quiet truths emerge one by one into the stillness. Fact 51. Around 5000–4000 BCE in the Andean highlands of South America, early camelid herders at sites like Loricacha and Guitarrero Cave began managing wild guanaco and vicuña populations more deliberately. Bone assemblages show a gradual increase in juvenile culling patterns, young males taken for tender meat while females were spared for breeding, alongside cut marks from fine obsidian blades used to fillet haunches and extract marrow. This proto-pastoralism provided a steadier supply of red meat and wool than sporadic big-game hunting, allowing groups to occupy higher-altitude puna grasslands year-round and supporting the slow accumulation of surplus that would later fuel monumental architecture in the region. Fact 52. In the Sahara during the Neolithic subpluvial, roughly 7000–4000 BCE, when the region was a green savanna dotted with lakes, hunters at sites like Gabero and Adrar Buz pursued large savanna species: hippopotamus, crocodile, buffalo, antelope with barbed bone harpoons and stone-tipped arrows. Butchered hippo bones, especially vertebrae and ribs, display deep chop marks from heavy basalt axes, while smaller antelope remains show lighter filleting cuts. Meat from these animals, rich in fat during wet seasons, sustained semi-sedentary fishing-hunting communities that left behind some of the earliest known rock art depicting speared game and communal feasts. Fact 53. By 4000 BCE in the Pontic steppe, early steppe pastoralists, predecessors to the Yamnaya, had incorporated sheep, goats, and cattle into mobile economies, supplementing them with hunted saiga antelope and wild horses. Kurgan-associated faunal remains often include a mix of domestic and wild species, with cut marks indicating that wild game was processed with the same care as herded stock. Hides tanned for tents, meat dried for long treks, marrow cracked open for fat-rich pemmican-like stores. This blended strategy of herding and opportunistic hunting gave steppe peoples remarkable resilience and mobility, setting the stage for their later expansions across Eurasia. Fact 54. In the Pacific Northwest of North America, around 4000–2000 BCE, maritime forager-hunters of the old Cordilleran tradition intensified salmon runs with weirs, nets, and leasters while continuing to hunt elk, deer, and sea mammals. Seal and sea lion bones from shell middens at sites like Glenrose and Hatzick Rock show systematic butchery, blubber stripped in sheets for rendering into oil, meat filleted for drying on racks over alder fires. The combination of marine fat and terrestrial lean meat created one of the highest calorie diets documented in pre-agricultural societies, supporting dense populations, elaborate woodworking, and the earliest monumental plank houses in the Americas. Fact 55. Around 3500 BCE in Mesopotamia, Sumerian city-states like Uruk and Eridu show evidence of large-scale organized hunting alongside early domestication. Cylinder seals and reliefs depict kings spearing lions and wild bulls, while faunal remains from temple precincts include aurochs and onager bones with deep axe cuts and roasting traces. Meat from these prestige hunts was distributed during festivals and offerings, turning the act of killing large game into a political and religious performance that reinforced elite authority while still providing substantial protein to urban populations. Fact 56. In pre-dynastic Egypt, circa 4000–3200 BCE, Nakata II communities hunted desert game oryx, ibex, gazelle with recurved bows and throw sticks while keeping cattle in floodplains. Tomb reliefs and palettes show scenes of netting birds and spearing hippos, and zooarchaeological samples reveal high proportions of juvenile cattle bones, indicating selective slaughter for tender veal and milk. Meat feasts in elite burials, evidenced by cattle skulls and butchered limb bones, served as offerings to the dead and displays of wealth, linking meat consumption ever more tightly to social status and afterlife beliefs. Fact 57. By 3000 BCE in the Indus Valley, Harappan urban centers like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa show a mixed economy where domestic water buffalo, zebu cattle, and sheep supplied the majority of meat, supplemented by hunted nilgai, blackbuck, and wild boar. Standardized brick-lined drains near house clusters contain discarded bones with consistent filleting marks from copper tools, suggesting household-level processing. The predictability of herded meat reduced the risks of hunting failure, allowing urban populations to grow to tens of thousands while dedicating labor to craft, trade, and monumental drainage systems. Fact 58. In Bronze Age Europe, around 2500–1800 BCE, Bell-Beaker and early Unetist groups intensified cattle herding while maintaining hunts of red deer and wild boar in forested margins. Grave goods often include polished stone battle axes alongside cattle mandibles and antler picks, and isotopic data from human bone collagen show continued high trophic level protein intake even as farming intensified. Meat-sharing rituals, evidenced by large roasting pits and feasting debris, likely cemented alliances during a time of increasing social stratification and long-distance exchange of metals and amber. Fact 59. Around 2000 BCE in the Aegean, Minoan Crete combined pastoralism with hunting of agrami, wild goats, and fallow deer in mountainous interiors. Faunal remains from palaces like Knossos include butchered agrami horns used as architectural decorations and large quantities of goat and sheep bones processed for meat, marrow, and hides. The palace economy centralized meat distribution, evidenced by linear tablets recording livestock tallies, turning animal protein into a managed resource that supported specialized artisans, sailors, and the elaborate frescoes depicting bull-leaping rituals. Fact 60. In Shang Dynasty China, circa 1600–1050 BCE, oracle bone inscriptions and sacrificial pits at Anyang record massive cattle, pig, and dog sacrifices alongside royal hunts of tigers, leopards, and elephants in the Yellow River floodplain. Thousands of cattle scapulae and turtle plastrons bear divination inscriptions, while associated faunal debris shows systematic dismemberment, limbs removed for boiling, skulls split for brain extraction. Meat from these hunts and sacrifices was shared in feasts that reinforced the king's divine mandate, blending practical nutrition with cosmological symbolism in one of the earliest literate civilizations. These 10 more facts now lie quietly alongside the 50 that came before, each one a calm, measured step deeper into the long human relationship with meat. The ancient herders and hunters have receded a little farther, some driving cattle across steppe horizons, others spearing hippos beside papyrus marshes, still others carving oracle bones under torchlight in walled cities. Their fires have dimmed to embers, their voices softened to whispers carried on the wind, yet the thread of shared flesh and marrow that sustained thought, community, and culture remains steady and unbroken. The night continues to cradle us in its gentle hush. When the moment feels right, we will return to this exact place and let the next quiet truths rise one by one into the peaceful dark. For now, let the accumulated weight of 60 shared moments settle around you like the softest wool blanket. Let the distant lowing of long-vanished herds and the faint crackle of ancient hearths become a soothing, wordless lullaby. Drift gently, safely held within the vast, tranquil river of our past. Fact 61. In the late Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean, around 1400–1200 BCE, Mycenaean palace economies at Pylos and Knossos centralized meat distribution through vast storerooms filled with cattle and pig bones showing systematic butchery, long bones split for marrow, ribs chopped into portions for roasting. Linear B tablets record tallies of livestock delivered as tribute or for palace feasts, where meat was allocated by rank, choice cuts for the wanax, king, and warriors, lesser portions for artisans and dependents. This hierarchical sharing turned animal protein into a tool of political cohesion, binding distant communities to the palace through the promise of shared bounty. Fact 62. Around 1200 BCE, as the Bronze Age collapsed across the eastern Mediterranean, smaller, more mobile groups, often called sea peoples in Egyptian records, relied on hunting and raiding to supplement shrinking agricultural yields. Butchered pig and deer bones from destruction layers at sites like Ashkelon and Ugarit show hasty processing with bronze knives, skinning marks rushed, marrow hastily extracted. In times of disruption, meat from wild game and captured livestock became a critical emergency resource, sustaining displaced populations long enough to resettle and adapt in new landscapes such as the Philistine Plain. Fact 63. In Iron Age Levant, circa 1700 BCE, Israelite and Judahite households at sites like Tel Rahav and Khirbet Qeiyafa consumed mostly sheep and goat meat, with occasional beef from older draft animals. Faunal remains reveal a pattern of household-level slaughter, bones discarded in domestic trash pits with cut marks from iron sickles repurposed as knives. Biblical texts describe meat consumption tied to festivals and hospitality. The act of sharing a slaughtered kid or lamb reinforced kinship and guest friendship bonds in a society where daily calories came largely from grain and legumes. Fact 64. By 900–600 BCE in the Assyrian heartland, royal lion hunts depicted in palace reliefs at Nimrud and Nineveh were carefully staged spectacles. Actual butchery evidence from trash middens near palaces shows lions processed alongside domestic cattle and gazelle, skin removed in sheets for prestige display, meat roasted or boiled for elite consumption. These hunts served propaganda purposes, portraying the king as protector and provider, while the distributed meat reinforced loyalty among courtiers and soldiers in one of the first large-scale empires. Fact 65. In Zhou Dynasty China around 1500 BCE, bronze ritual vessels from aristocratic tombs often contained traces of cooked meat residues alongside oracle bone divinations asking for successful hunts or abundant herds. Faunal assemblages from urban centers like Anyang's later phases and Fenghao show pigs as the most common meat source, bones cracked open for marrow, skulls split for brains, while deer and boar from royal hunts added prestige protein. Meat feasts during ancestral rites linked the living to the dead, with portions offered on altars before the remainder was shared among kin and retainers. Fact 66. In the Hallstatt and Latine Celtic world of Central Europe, 800–100 BCE, elite burials under tumuli frequently include whole roasted pigs, cattle haunches, and wild boar tusks as grave goods. Butchered bones from settlement sites like Huneberg show iron knives used for precise filleting and joint separation, with marrow-rich long bones deliberately fractured. Large feasting pits filled with animal remains suggest periodic communal banquets where meat distribution followed social rank, best portions for chieftains and druids, cementing alliances in a decentralized, warrior-centered society. Fact 67. Around 500 BCE in the Persian Empire, Achaemenid royal road stations and satrapal palaces maintained herds for provisioning armies and couriers. Persepolis tablets record deliveries of sheep, goats, and cattle for court consumption, while faunal debris shows systematic butchery for stews and roasts flavored with imported spices. Meat sustained the vast administrative network that held the empire together, turning animal protein into logistical fuel for one of history's largest contiguous states. Fact 68. In the classical Greek world, circa 500–300 BCE, symposium culture elevated meat to a marker of status. Literary sources describe whole roasted lambs or kids at civic sacrifices, with portions distributed to citizens according to lot or merit. Zooarchaeological samples from Athens, Agora, and sanctuaries like Delphi show sheep and goat bones dominating, many bearing roasting traces and cut marks from bronze or iron cleavers. Meat was rarely an everyday food for most. Its periodic appearance in religious and social contexts made each shared by the moment of communal elevation. Fact 69. In the Mauryan Empire of India, around 300 BCE, Ashokan edicts and Arthashastra texts describe state-managed hunting reserves and slaughter regulations to supply meat for armies and urban markets. Bones from Pataliputra excavations reveal cattle, buffalo, and goat remains processed with iron tools, joints disarticulated, marrow extracted, while Buddhist influence began discouraging unnecessary killing. Meat remained a practical necessity for soldiers and laborers, even as ethical debates about ahimsa, non-violence, gained traction among elites. Fact 70. By the time of the Roman Republic and early empire, 200 BCE, 200 CE, large-scale meat consumption reached unprecedented levels in urban centers. Pompeii's trash deposits and military forts along the limes contained thousands of pig, sheep, goat, and cattle bones showing standardized butchery, chops from professional macellarii butchers, marrow routinely harvested. Legionaries received a daily ration including bacon or fresh pork. Urban poor accessed cheap sausage and offal from street vendors. Meat, preserved by salting, smoking, and garum fermentation, became a staple that sustained armies, cities, and the sprawling infrastructure of empire. These 10 additional truths now rest beside the 60 that preceded them, each one a calm ripple across the long surface of time. The ancient feasters and butchers have stepped farther into shadow, some reclining at symposium couches, others carving oracle bones by lamplight, still others driving herds along royal roads under distant horizons. Their voices have softened to the faintest echo, their fires reduced to glowing coals long cooled, yet the quiet thread of meat shared, offered, and savored continues unbroken through every age. Fact 71. In the later Roman Empire, from the 3rd to 5th centuries CE, military supply chains delivered preserved pork, salted, smoked, or pickled in brine, to frontier forts along the Rhine and Danube. Zooarchaeological samples from sites like Vindolanda and Saalburg show pig bones far outnumbering cattle and sheep in barracks middens, many split lengthwise for marrow extraction even after salting. This reliable meat ration, often called laridum or perna, sustained legionaries through campaigns and winter garrisons, helping maintain discipline and combat readiness across an empire stretched thin by constant border pressures. Fact 72. Around 400–600 CE, as the Western Roman world fragmented into successor kingdoms, early medieval monastic communities in Gaul and Britain continued large-scale meat consumption during feast days despite growing ascetic ideals. Animal bones from sites like Jarrow and Wearmouth reveal cattle and pig remains processed with iron knives, joints disarticulated, marrow routinely harvested, while documentary records show allowances for meat on major liturgical celebrations. These periodic feasts reminded monks of the abundance of creation, balancing spiritual discipline with the physical needs that meat so efficiently met. Fact 73. In the Byzantine Empire during the 6th–9th centuries, Constantinople's markets offered pork, mutton, and beef from state-supervised slaughterhouses. The Book of the Eparch regulated butchers to prevent price gouging and ensure quality. Faunal debris from urban excavations shows systematic butchery, skulls split, long bones cracked, reflecting professional specialization. Meat remained central to urban diets, especially for soldiers of the tagmata and the imperial court, where lavish banquets reinforced political alliances and displayed the emperor's role as provider for the Christian Roman world. Fact 74. Among the early Islamic caliphates from the 7th to 10th centuries, Baghdad and Damascus saw meat markets, Suq al-Lahamin, flourish under strict halal regulations. Archaeological layers from Samarra and Fustat contain sheep, goat, and cattle bones with precise cut marks from curved knives designed for dehab, swift throat slitting, followed by hanging to drain blood. Meat was grilled as kebabs, stewed in rich tagines, or preserved as shawarma. Its availability in urban centers supported growing populations of scholars, merchants, and administrators in one of history's most cosmopolitan eras. Fact 75. In Viking Age Scandinavia, 810–50 CE, Norse settlements from Greenland to Novgorod relied on a mix of hunted and herded meat: seal, walrus, reindeer, cattle, sheep, pig. Bones from sites like Hedeby and Birka show heavy processing, marrow systematically extracted by splitting femora and humeri, hides removed for clothing and sales. Long-distance trade brought dried cod and whale meat south, while walrus ivory and hides moved north. Meat calories powered raiding, exploration, and the settlement of harsh northern landscapes. Fact 76. During the Central Asian steppe empires of the 9th–13th centuries, Karakhanid, Ghaznavid, early Mongol, mobile pastoralists consumed mutton and horse meat as dietary staples. Faunal remains from Karakoram and other seasonal camps reveal sheep and goat bones dominating, many roasted whole over open fires or boiled in cauldrons for shulan communal stew. Horse slaughter was reserved for special occasions or emergencies. The high-fat content of steppe meat sustained riders through long campaigns, enabling the rapid conquests that reshaped Eurasia. Fact 77. In medieval Western Europe, 1300 CE, feudal lords and monasteries controlled hunting rights in royal forests and chases. Poaching laws protected deer, boar, and hare for elite consumption. Bones from castle middens like Chepstow and Dover show red deer and fallow deer processed with care, antlers kept as trophies, meat roasted or potted in jelly. Commoners ate more pork and mutton from household pigs and sheep. Periodic feasts on feast days or after harvest turned meat into a communal reward that reinforced social bonds across rigid hierarchies. Fact 78. In the Mali Empire of West Africa, circa 1235–1400 CE, Mansa Musa's court and urban centers like Timbuktu consumed goat, sheep, and cattle meat alongside game from the savanna. Arabic travelers described lavish banquets with roasted meats spiced with imported grains of paradise. Archaeological work at sites like Gao shows cattle and caprine bones with cut marks from iron tools, many marrow cracked. Meat sustained traders, scholars, and pilgrims along trans-Saharan routes, turning animal protein into economic and cultural currency. Fact 79. In the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, 1325–1521 CE, meat came primarily from domesticated turkeys and dogs, Xoloitzcuintli, supplemented by hunted deer, peccary, and waterfowl from Chinempa fields and lake margins. Codex illustrations and zooarchaeological finds from the Templo Mayor show dog bones split for marrow and turkey wings removed for feather work. Large public feasts during monthly Vaintina ceremonies distributed meat from sacrificial victims and palace stores, linking protein consumption to religious and political life in one of the densest pre-modern cities. Fact 80, in the Inca Empire of the Andes, 1438–1533 CE, state-managed camelid herds, llama and alpaca, supplied meat for the army, mida laborers, and royal feasts. Storehouses, calca, held dried charqui, jerky, and ca charqui made from freeze-dried meat at high altitudes. Bones from Machu Picchu and Cusco show systematic butchery, limbs disarticulated, marrow extracted with stone pounders. Meat redistribution through the state's reciprocity system reinforced the Inca ruler's role as generous provider, binding a vast empire through shared sustenance. These 10 more gentle facts now settle beside the 70 that came before, each one a soft echo in the long corridor of time. The butchers, feast-givers, and herders have drifted farther into the haze, some riding across endless steppe, others carving ritual meat beside lake temples, still others tending monastic hearths under northern skies. Their knives have been laid down, their fires cooled to ash scattered by centuries of wind, yet the quiet story of meat eaten together, offered in thanks, carried on journeys, and shared in ceremony flows on without pause. Fact 81. In Ming Dynasty China from the 14th to 17th centuries, imperial hunts in the northern hunting parks near Beijing targeted deer, hare, and wild boar with composite bows and falconry. Court records and excavated faunal remains from palace kitchens show deer haunches roasted whole, marrow bones split with steel cleavers, and venison preserved in soy-based marinades. Meat from these hunts was distributed to officials and military commanders as a symbol of imperial favor, while everyday urban populations in Nanjing and Beijing relied on pork from state-regulated pig farms. Bones showing consistent butchery patterns that reflected both elite prestige and mass urban provisioning. Fact 82. During the Ottoman Empire's classical period, 1453–1600 CE, Istanbul's Grand Bazaar and palace kitchens processed vast quantities of mutton, lamb, and beef from Anatolian and Balkan herds. Janissary barracks consumed enormous amounts of stewed mutton, kuzu guves. Faunal debris from Topkapi Palace middens reveals sheep and goat bones dominating, many cracked for marrow and boiled for rich broths that formed the base of pilaf and kebab dishes. Meat feasts during Ramadan iftars and Bayram celebrations reinforced communal bonds across a multi-ethnic empire, turning shared protein into a daily ritual of belonging. Fact 83. In the Safavid Empire of Persia, 1501–1736 CE, royal hunts, shakar, pursued gazelle, ibex, and leopard across the Iranian plateau using cheetahs trained for coursing. Miniature paintings depict the aftermath, animals skinned and quartered on the spot, while archaeological layers from Isfahan show gazelle and sheep bones with precise cut marks from curved shamshir like knives. Meat was grilled as kabab or stewed with saffron and dried limes. These hunts supplied both the Shah's table and gifts to foreign ambassadors, blending practical nutrition with diplomatic display. Fact 84. In the Kingdom of Congo, Central Africa, circa 1500–1650 CE, before and during early Portuguese contact, elites consumed buffalo, antelope, and domestic goat meat during ceremonies and feasts. Bones from Mbanza Congo excavations display iron knife filleting and marrow extraction. Large game was reserved for the mani, king, and nobility, while commoners ate smaller game and fish. Meat-sharing rituals strengthened political alliances in a centralized state that spanned rainforests and savannas, with protein reinforcing the spiritual and social order. Fact 85. In Edo period Japan, 1603–1868 CE, despite Buddhist-influenced taboos on eating four-legged animals, warriors, samurai, and certain classes consumed wild boar inashishi, deer shika, and bear meat under the euphemism mountain whale. Bones from castle towns and rural sites show secretive butchery, marrow cracked discreetly, hides tanned for armor padding. Medicinal tonics made from bear gall and deer antler velvet circulated among the elite. Meat remained a rare, high-status food that quietly supplemented the rice and fish diet of most of the population. Fact 86. During the 17th–18th centuries in colonial North America, European settlers and enslaved Africans adapted to new environments by hunting white-tailed deer, wild turkey, and passenger pigeon while raising pigs and cattle. Faunal remains from Jamestown, Williamsburg, and plantation sites show deer bones outnumbering domesticates in early years, with cut marks from steel knives and axes indicating professional butchery learned from native teachers. Meat smoked, salted, or jerked sustained frontier expansion, while enslaved communities often received offal and scraps, turning every part of the animal into survival food. Fact 87. In 18th century France, before and during the Revolution, urban markets in Paris offered beef from Limousin oxen, mutton from Provence, and pork from local pigs. Butchers' guilds regulated cuts, bones from privies and taverns show systematic dismemberment, prime ribs for the wealthy, cheaper brisket and tongue for workers. Revolutionary pamphlets criticized aristocratic game monopolies while praising the people's right to meat. The guillotine's shadow fell across both palace hunts and street sausage stalls, marking meat as both necessity and symbol of equality. Fact 88. During the 19th century Industrial Revolution in Britain, working-class diets shifted toward cheap imported beef and preserved meats from Argentina and Australia. Bones from London tenement middens show increased beef consumption after refrigerated shipping began in the 1870s, long bones split for soup stock, ribs roasted or boiled. The rise of meat in urban diets supported factory labor's energy demands. Charitable soup kitchens distributed broth made from bones, turning even marginal animal parts into a lifeline for the poor. Fact 89. In Meiji-era Japan, 1868–1912 CE, the government actively promoted beef eating to strengthen the population for modernization. Sukiyaki and judon emerged as new dishes. Early slaughterhouses in Yokohama processed cattle with Western-style knives, bones showing deep chops for marrow-rich oxtail soups. Meat transitioned from taboo to patriotic food, symbolizing alignment with Western strength while still remaining secondary to rice in most households. Fact 90. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the American Midwest's meat packing revolution, centered in Chicago's Union Stock Yards, industrialized slaughter on an unprecedented scale. Millions of cattle, hogs, and sheep passed through annually. Bones from waste lagoons show standardized butchery lines, disassembly into primal cuts, offal rendered for soap and fertilizer, marrow extracted mechanically. Refrigerated railcars carried fresh beef nationwide. Canned corned beef and Spam sustained soldiers in 2 world wars, turning meat into a global commodity that fed armies and cities alike. These 10 additional facts now lie quietly beside the 80 that preceded them, each one a calm, measured note in the long melody of our relationship with meat. The butchers of Chicago's stockyards, the hunters of Safavid cheetahs, the Ming courtiers receiving venison gifts, the Edo samurai savoring forbidden boar all have stepped farther into the mist of time. Their knives rest, their fires have cooled to faint ash carried on centuries of wind, yet the thread of flesh shared, preserved, traded, and savored remains steady, gentle, unbroken. Fact 91. In the years following World War I, roughly 1919–1939, canned meat, Spam from Hormel, corned beef from Argentina, bully beef from British Empire sources, became staples in households across the industrialized world. Factory records and household waste studies from the period show tin cans accumulating in landfills, their contents having provided cheap, shelf-stable protein during economic hardship. The convenience of opening a tin and heating its contents turned meat from a fresh luxury into an everyday reliability for millions of urban families and rural workers alike. Fact 92. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, American government programs such as the Federal Surplus Commodities Corporation distributed massive quantities of pork and beef to the unemployed. Butchered hogs and cattle from overproduction were processed into canned and salted forms. Bones from relief kitchen middens reveal heavy use of marrow-rich shanks and knuckles boiled into soup stocks that fed bread lines and soup kitchens, keeping nutritional collapse at bay for countless families when fresh meat had become unaffordable. Fact 93. In the Soviet Union during the 1920s and 1930s collectivization era, state farms, kolkhozy and sovkhozy, centralized meat production on an industrial scale. Faunal remains from urban canteens in Moscow and Leningrad show increased pork and beef consumption after the worst famine years, with bones displaying standardized Soviet-era butchery, long bones split mechanically, offal rendered into sausage. Centralized slaughterhouses supplied workers' canteens and the Red Army. Meat rations became symbols of socialist progress even as shortages persisted in rural areas. Fact 94. During World War II, 1939–1945, meat rationing reshaped diets across the Allied and Axis powers. In Britain, Spam and corned beef from American Lend-Lease shipments dominated civilian plates. Bones from wartime domestic middens show fewer fresh cuts and more reliance on preserved products. In the United States, Victory Gardens supplemented protein, but military contracts drove record slaughter. Chicago and Omaha yards processed millions of animals annually, their byproducts fueling everything from explosives to medicines, while fresh steak became a rare treat reserved for special occasions. Fact 95. Post-1945 in the United States, the rise of the suburban supermarket and the interstate highway system made fresh beef widely available. The development of feedlots in the Great Plains, concentrating thousands of cattle on grain diets, produced marbled, tender meat at lower cost. Bones from mid-century household trash show a dramatic increase in beef rib and loin cuts. The backyard barbecue became a cultural ritual, turning meat into a symbol of post-war prosperity and the American dream of abundance. Fact 96. In the 1950s and 1960s, fast food chains like McDonald's revolutionized meat consumption by standardizing the hamburger patty. Industrial grinders processed trimmings from multiple animals into uniform patties. Early franchise waste samples reveal high volumes of ground beef bones and cartilage fragments. The drive-through model made hot, affordable meat accessible to millions daily, shifting eating habits from home-cooked roasts to quick portable protein that fit the accelerating pace of modern life. Fact 97. During the Green Revolution and post-war economic booms in Asia, meat consumption began to climb rapidly. In Japan after 1950, dietary guidelines encouraged more animal protein. Bones from urban waste in Tokyo show rising pork and beef alongside traditional fish. In South Korea during the 1960s–1980s, Miracle on the Han, samgyeopsal, pork belly, and bulgogi became everyday foods as incomes rose. Increased slaughter of pigs and cattle reflected newfound purchasing power and a cultural shift toward Western-influenced diets. Fact 98. In China after the economic reforms of 1978, pork consumption exploded as household incomes grew and backyard pig raising gave way to large-scale swine farms. By the 1990s, China became the world's largest pork producer. Bones from urban landfills in Beijing and Shanghai show a surge in pork ribs, trotters, and shoulder cuts processed with modern electric saws. The phrase "kai ku," eat bitterness, slowly gave way to "kai hao," eat well, with meat symbolizing escape from scarcity and entry into middle-class comfort. Fact 99. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, global meat production became dominated by a handful of multinational companies. JBS, Tyson, Cargill, WH Group, operating integrated supply chains from feed to fork. Feedlot cattle in Brazil, the US, and Australia, industrial pigs in China and Denmark, broiler chickens worldwide, all produce standardized cuts at unprecedented volumes. Waste studies from consumer nations show bones and offal increasingly rendered into pet food, fertilizers, and industrial oils, closing the loop on every part of the animal in ways unimaginable to earlier hunters. Fact 100. Across the opening decades of the 21st century, meat-eating patterns began to diverge sharply by region and class. In high-income countries, per capita consumption plateaued or declined slightly amid health concerns, environmental awareness, and the rise of plant-based alternatives. In rapidly industrializing nations, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Nigeria, meat intake continued to climb as incomes rose and urbanization accelerated. Bones from urban waste in Lagos, Jakarta, and Hanoi show growing proportions of chicken and pork alongside traditional goat and beef. The global story of meat became one of both convergence, more people eating more meat than ever before, and fragmentation, different societies choosing different animals, preparations, and ethical stances. And so we reach the 100th fact, a quiet milestone in this long, unbroken chain. From the first tentative scrapes of stone on bone 3.4 million years ago in the Ethiopian Rift to the humming feedlots and refrigerated trucks of today, meat has traveled with us, nourishing bodies, fueling migrations, binding communities, marking status, sustaining armies, feeding cities, and shaping the very contours of our minds and societies. Each bite, each shared meal, each preserved strip carried across steppe or sea has been a small continuation of that original act, taking what the world offered and making it part of ourselves. The ancient hunters, the herders, the butchers, the kings at feast tables, the workers on ration lines, the families at backyard grills, they all stand together now in the soft haze of memory, their fires long cooled, their voices reduced to the gentlest whisper carried on time's patient wind. The story does not end here, it simply rests for a moment, breathing quietly beside us. Fact 101. In the opening decades of the 21st century, broiler chicken emerged as the single most consumed meat worldwide, surpassing both pork and beef in total volume. Industrial poultry farms, concentrated in the southeastern United States, northern China, Brazil's Mato Grosso, and parts of India, raised birds in climate-controlled sheds reaching densities of 15-20 birds per square meter. Bones from urban waste streams in cities like Sao Paulo, Guangzhou, and Lagos began to show a dramatic rise in chicken femurs and tibiotarsi, many mechanically separated and bearing the faint scoring of automated deboning lines. The low production cost, rapid growth cycle, 6 to 8 weeks to market weight, and neutral cultural acceptance across religions made chicken the protein that fed the fastest-growing populations on Earth. Fact 102. Around 2010-2020, the phenomenon of flexitarianism gained measurable traction in high-income countries. Surveys and household purchase data from Europe, North America, Australia, and parts of East Asia showed increasing numbers of people reducing, but not eliminating, meat intake, often replacing red meat with chicken, fish, eggs, or plant-based patties. Waste analyses from cities like Berlin, Toronto, and Melbourne revealed a subtle shift in discarded bones, fewer beef ribs and pork shoulders, slightly more chicken carcasses, and occasional plant protein packaging. The change reflected growing awareness of health risks. Saturated fat, processed meats classified as carcinogenic by WHO in 2015, animal welfare concerns, and carbon footprints, yet overall global meat tonnage continued to climb because population growth and rising incomes in the global south more than offset the modest declines in the north. Fact 103. By the mid-2010s, lab-grown, cultured meat moved from university laboratories into pilot-scale production. Early bioreactor samples, first publicly tasted in 2013 as a small hamburger patty costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, gradually became more affordable through advances in scaffolding, serum-free media, and bioreactor design. By the early 2020s, regulatory approvals arrived. Singapore in 2020 for Eat Just's cultured chicken nuggets, the United States in 2023 for Upside Foods and Good Meat chicken products, Israel in 2024 for Aleph Farms steak. Although these products contain no animal bones to discard, their arrival quietly reframed the ancient question of meat's origin. no longer requiring the death of a living creature, yet still delivering muscle fibers, fat cells, and the familiar taste memory that had anchored human diets for millions of years. Fact 104. In parallel, precision fermentation companies began producing animal-free whey, casein, collagen, and heme proteins using genetically modified yeast or fungi. By the late 2010s and early 2020s, brands such as Perfect Day Dairy Proteins, Impossible Foods, heme from soy leg hemoglobin, and the Every Company Egg White Proteins appeared on supermarket shelves. These ingredients allowed burgers, ice creams, and baked goods to mimic the mouthfeel and flavor of animal-derived versions without any slaughter. Waste streams from consumer households started to include fewer traditional meat bones and more discarded packaging from hybrid or fully plant-based products, signaling a slow diversification of what meat could mean in daily life. Fact 105. During the same period, insect protein gained regulatory footholds and modest market presence. The European Union approved mealworm Tenebrio molitor, house cricket Aecta domesticus, and migratory locust Locusta migratoria for human consumption between 2021 and 2023. Canada, Australia, and several Asian countries followed. Small-scale farms in Thailand, Kenya, and the Netherlands raised crickets in stacked trays, harvesting them for flour used in protein bars, pasta, and snacks. Insect exoskeletons, chitin-rich and indigestible, appeared in waste as fine powdery residue rather than recognizable bones, offering a low-land, low-water, low-emission alternative that echoed humanity's earliest opportunistic scavenging of whatever nutrient-dense sources the environment provided. Fact 106. In many rapidly urbanizing parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America during the 2010s-2020s, street meat remained a dominant form of animal protein access. Grilled suya in Nigeria, shawarma in Egypt, anticuchos in Peru, sate ayam in Indonesia, and braai in South Africa delivered affordable, flavorful meat, often goat, chicken, or beef offal, cooked over charcoal on roadside stalls. Discarded bones from these high-turnover vendors accumulated in informal waste piles rather than household bins, showing the same patterns of careful filleting and marrow cracking that archaeologists once found at 2-million-year-old sites in Olduvai Gorge. Nothing wasted, every calorie claimed. Fact 107. Climate change impacts began visibly reshaping meat geographies by the 2020s. Heat waves and droughts in traditional beef-producing regions, Australia's outback, the American Southwest, southern Brazil, reduced pasture quality and increased feed grain prices, pushing some producers toward more drought-tolerant species, goats over cattle or indoor systems. At the same time, thawing permafrost in Siberia and northern Canada exposed ancient mammoth and bison carcasses, whose well-preserved meat, some dated 30,000, 50,000 years old, was occasionally sampled by researchers and indigenous groups, offering a strange, living echo of Pleistocene hunting, protein from animals that had last walked the earth long before the first stone tools scraped bone in Ethiopia. Fact 108. During the global supply chain disruptions of 2020-2022, pandemic, port congestion, avian influenza outbreaks, African swine fever waves, meat prices spiked in many countries, temporarily reducing consumption among lower-income households. Bones and municipal waste from cities in Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, and the Philippines showed short-term increases in chicken, cheaper and faster growing over pork and beef. These fluctuations reminded the world how deeply meat remained tied to economic stability. When supply tightened, the oldest survival strategy reappeared: eat what is most reliably available, even if it means shifting species once again. Fact 109. By the mid-2020s, regenerative grazing and carbon-neutral beef labels appeared on premium shelves in Europe, North America, and parts of Australia. Ranchers used rotational mob grazing, cover crops, and methane capture digesters to market meat as climate positive. Third-party audits and life cycle assessments accompanied these products, consumer waste from affluent households began to include more packaging from grass-finished, pasture-raised, or regenerative brands alongside conventional cuts. The marketing returned in a way to the deep past, celebrating animals raised on open land rather than feedlots, while still relying on the same fundamental biochemistry that had nourished Homo erectus on scavenged marrow 2 million years earlier. Fact 110. As we speak in the quiet of this night in February 2026, global meat production stands at roughly 360–380 million metric tons per year, more than at any previous moment in human history. Yet the share coming from chickens continues to rise fastest, insects and cultured products remain niche, and plant-based alternatives capture headlines far larger than their actual market volume. Bones and shells and chitin fragments from every continent pile quietly into landfills, composting facilities and rendering plants, closing nutrient loops in ways both ancient and futuristic. The first opportunistic scrape of a flake tool on a bovid bone in Dicica has lengthened into an unbroken line of adaptation, scavenging, hunting, herding, industrializing, reimagining, each stage preserving the same quiet truth. Meat, in whatever form, has been one of the most reliable companions on the long walk of our species. Fact 111. In the second half of the 2020s, single-cell protein production from methane-oxidizing bacteria and hydrogen-utilizing microbes began to scale in commercial bioreactors across Northern Europe and North America. Facilities in Finland, Denmark, and the American Midwest fed natural gas or green hydrogen to microbes that grew into nutrient-dense biomass, high in complete protein, low in saturated fat, and free of animal bones or muscle fibers. Early products appeared in animal feed first, then in processed human foods such as nuggets and mince blends. Discarded packaging from these items started showing up in household waste in Helsinki, Copenhagen, and Minneapolis, carrying labels that quietly echoed the oldest human instinct: find the most efficient way to capture calories from the world around us. Fact 112. By 2027–2028, regulatory frameworks in the European Union, United Kingdom, and several U.S. states expanded to allow wider sale of cultured seafood. Salmon fillets grown from Atlantic salmon cells, shrimp tails from white-leg shrimp lines, and bluefin tuna steaks from immortalized fish myoblasts. These products arrived with no swim bladders, no scales, no discarded fish bones in the trash. Only the familiar pink flesh and delicate fat marbling that had once required long ocean voyages and industrial trawlers. The shift reframed marine protein as something that could be produced on land, in controlled vats, reducing pressure on overfished stocks while preserving the taste memory that had drawn coastal hominins to shellfish middens 164,000 years ago at Pinnacle Point. Fact 113. Around the same period, vertical farming systems in urban centers, Singapore, Tokyo, Dubai, New York, began integrating insect-rearing modules on upper floors or basements. Crickets, black soldier fly larvae, and mealworms were fed on food waste streams from the lower levels, harvested and processed into powders for bread, pasta, energy bars, and meat extenders. The chitin shells, crushed into fine meal, entered composting loops rather than landfills. This closed-cycle model echoed the total utilization ethic seen in 400,000-year-old Schoningen spear sites and 19th-century rendering plants, where no part of the resource went unused. Fact 114. In many middle-income countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Nigeria, Kenya, urban street food culture continued to evolve around affordable grilled and stewed meats even as supermarket chains expanded. Sauté vendors, suya grills, nyama choma stands, and suya hawkers kept chicken, goat, and beef offal flowing through charcoal smoke. Bones from these high-volume operations piled in informal collection points, often sorted by waste pickers for rendering into stock cubes or pet food meal. The persistence of street meat showed how deeply the act of sharing cooked animal flesh remained woven into social life, quick, communal, flavorful, long after industrial systems had taken over most household cooking. Fact 115. During the late 2020s, methane emission taxes and carbon pricing mechanisms in the European Union, Canada, New Zealand, and parts of China began to nudge beef producers toward lower-impact systems. Feed additives that reduced enteric fermentation, seaweed-derived bromoform compounds, 3-NOP inhibitors appeared in commercial rations. Life cycle assessments attached to premium, low-methane beef packages promised 20–40% reductions in greenhouse gas intensity. Consumer waste from eco-conscious households included more of these labeled cuts alongside conventional ones, reflecting a quiet negotiation between ancient appetite and modern atmospheric limits. Fact 116. In parallel, the rise of cellular agriculture tourism emerged in places like San Francisco, Tel Aviv, and Singapore, tasting rooms where visitors sampled cultured foie gras, wagyu strips, and duck breast grown in bioreactors behind glass walls. No slaughter floor, no blood, only bioreactors gently stirring nutrient media, yet the flavor profiles, umami, fat melt, Maillard browning, recalled the roasted marrow bones cracked open at Jesher Benat Yaakov 780,000 years ago. These experiences reframed meat not as a product of death, but as an engineered echo of an ancient pleasure. Fact 117. By the close of the decade, global pork production faced recurring shocks from African swine fever variants that swept through East Asia, Eastern Europe, and parts of Latin America. Industrial farms responded with stricter biosecurity, multi-site production, air filtration, genetic selection for disease resistance, while smallholders in affected regions shifted toward chicken and fish. Municipal waste in cities like Hanoi, Manila, Bucharest, and Sao Paulo temporarily showed fewer pork bones and more poultry remains, illustrating once again how infectious pressure could redirect humanity's meat choices as surely as climate or economics had done for millennia. Fact 118. In indigenous and traditional communities, Inuit in Nunavut, Masa in East Africa, Mongolian herders on the steppe, Sami in northern Scandinavia, wild and herded meats remained central even as global markets pressed in. Caribou, seal, goat, yak, reindeer. Bones from these groups continued to be cracked for marrow, boiled for broth, and shared in seasonal ceremonies. Modern preservation methods, vacuum sealing, solar drying, blended with ancestral techniques, ensuring that the nutritional density first harnessed by Homo erectus on the African plains still sustained people living at the edges of industrial food systems. Fact 119. Around 2028–2030, hybrid products, blends of cultured cells, plant proteins, and fermented fungi, began to dominate new product launches in supermarkets across North America, Europe, and East Asia. Burgers that combined 30–60% cell-based beef with pea protein and mushroom-derived umami compounds appeared under brands promising better-for-you nutrition profiles. Packaging waste reflected this convergence: no clean bone fragments, only composite food scraps that decomposed faster in municipal composting. The line between meat and not meat blurred further, yet the core nutritional goal, dense, complete protein, remained the same one that drove Australopithecus to scavenge marrow 3.4 million years earlier. Fact 120. As we rest here in the stillness of this night in February 2026, knowing the years ahead will bring more bioreactors, more regulatory decisions, more cultural adaptations, the arc of meat in human life reveals itself as one long, unbroken thread. From the first hesitant cut marks on a goat like bone indica to the gentle stir of a bioreactor vat growing muscle fibers without a heartbeat. From shared marrow cracked open beside Alduin choppers to individually packaged patties heated in microwave ovens. From the risk-filled chase across savanna grass to the predictable yield of a climate-controlled shed. the impulse has remained steady. Secure the nutrients that allow thought, movement, community, and wonder to flourish. Fact 121. Into the early 2030s, seaweed-derived bromoform additives and synthetic 3-NOP analogs became standard in commercial cattle rations across Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, and parts of Brazil. Methane emissions per kilogram of beef dropped measurably in audited supply chains, sometimes by 25 to 50%, while the meat itself retained the familiar marbling, flavor compounds, and nutritional profile that Homo heidelbergensis once prized at Boxgrove 500,000 years ago. Labels on premium cuts in supermarkets from Sydney to Seattle began carrying small icons certifying low methane verified, a modern echo of the ancient human habit of selecting the most nourishing and least risky food source available in any given landscape. Fact 122. By the early 2030s, hybrid cultured plant products had captured roughly 12% of the global burger and mince category in high-income markets. Formulations combined 40–70% cell-cultured beef or pork with pea protein, mushroom mycelium, beet-derived color, and fermented yeast extracts for umami depth. Consumer waste audits in cities such as London, Los Angeles, Seoul, and Sao Paulo showed a steady increase in discarded composite food scraps, fewer clean beef rib bones, more soft, plant fiber-rich remnants that broke down faster in composting systems. The taste remained anchored in the same Maillard reaction chemistry that turned scavenged marrow into something delicious beside flickering Alduin hearths 2 million years earlier. Fact 123. In the same years, insect protein crossed from niche to mainstream in several middle-income nations. Thailand, South Africa, Mexico, and Vietnam saw cricket and black soldier fly powders incorporated into school meal programs, instant noodles, and bakery items at government-subsidized prices. Chitin residues, fine and powdery, appeared in municipal compost streams rather than recognizable bone fragments. The nutritional density, high-quality protein, iron, zinc, B12, mirrored the advantages that first drew early hominins to marrow and organ meats, only now sourced from insects raised on agricultural byproducts and food waste streams instead of wild carcasses. Fact 124. Around 2030–2035, large-scale cellular breweries in Singapore, Israel, the Netherlands, and California began producing cultured foie gras, wagyu, and bluefin tuna at costs approaching conventional premium products. No livers were force-fed, no cattle confined in feedlots, no tuna long-lined across oceans. Yet the resulting tissues carried the same intramuscular fat patterns and connective tissue architecture that had once required the death of living animals. Tasting events and restaurant menus started listing these items alongside traditional ones, quietly reframing meat as a technology rather than exclusively a harvest, a continuation of the inventive spirit that hafted the first Levallois points 300,000 years ago. Fact 125. During this period, regenerative and agroecological livestock systems gained certification schemes and premium pricing in Europe, parts of North America, and Southern Africa. Mob-grazed cattle on multi-species pastures sequestered measurable carbon in soil organic matter. Third-party soil tests and satellite monitoring verified claims. Bones discarded from these regenerative cuts in household waste looked identical to those from conventional beef, long bones split for stock, ribs trimmed for grilling, yet the production story beneath them returned, in a gentle circle, to the open grasslands where Homo erectus first followed migratory herds 1.8 million years ago. Fact 126. In rapidly growing megacities across Africa and South Asia, Lagos, Kinshasa, Dhaka, Karachi, Addis Ababa, street meat remained the dominant form of affordable animal protein well into the 2030s. Goat, chicken, and beef offal grilled over charcoal or stewed in roadside pots continue to feed millions daily. Discarded femurs, vertebrae, and ribs piled in informal waste heaps, collected by recyclers for rendering into low-cost bouillon cubes or animal feed meal. The social ritual of sharing hot, spiced meat from a communal grill preserved the same communal warmth once felt around Magdalenian reindeer fires 17,000 years ago at Lodgery Oat. Fact 127. By the mid-2030s, African swine fever-resistant pig breeds, developed through gene editing, CRISPR-mediated tweaks to CD163 receptors, began repopulating commercial herds in China, Vietnam, and Eastern Europe. Slaughter volumes rebounded. Pork bones reappeared in greater numbers in urban waste streams after a decade of relative scarcity. The genetic intervention was one more chapter in humanity's long partnership with sus scrofa, first hunted in Eurasian forests 40,000 years ago, later domesticated in multiple centers 10,000 years ago, now precisely reshaped to fit modern biosecurity and demand. Fact 128. In indigenous Arctic communities, Inuit in Nunavut and Greenland, Yupik in Alaska, Chukchi in Siberia, traditional hunting of caribou, seal, walrus, and bowhead whale persisted alongside imported supermarket foods. Vacuum-sealed caribou haunches and aged muktuk whale skin and blubber continued to supply vitamin C, omega-3s, and dense calories in environments where plant foods remained scarce. Bones cracked for marrow and boiled for broth still followed patterns recognizable from Upper Paleolithic sites. The continuity reminded everyone that meat's role as survival fuel had never truly changed, only the tools and the landscape around it. Fact 129. Around 2035-2040, whole muscle cultured steaks, thick cuts grown on plant-based or synthetic scaffolds seeded with bovine or porcine myocyte cells, entered high-end restaurant supply chains in Tokyo, Dubai, New York, and Paris. Chefs seared them exactly as they would grass-finished ribeye. The Maillard crust, juice release, and fat render patterns matched tradition so closely that many diners could not distinguish them blind. No marrow bones were left behind in kitchen bins, only clean plates and satisfied memory, yet the sensory experience remained tethered to the same primal satisfaction that once rewarded a successful spear thrust at Schoningen 400,000 years ago. Fact 130. As the calendar turns deeper into the century, global meat consumption per capita begins to plateau in most regions, not from shortage, but from choice, technology, and constraint. Chicken and cultured fermented plant hybrid products rise fastest. Red meat volumes stabilize or slowly decline in wealthy nations while continuing modest growth in urbanizing middle-income countries. Discarded animal bones become scarcer in many waste streams, replaced by softer residues, chitin dust, mycelium fibers, spent bioreactor media, plant protein composites. Yet the fundamental equation endures: secure dense, complete protein, share it, remember its taste, pass the knowledge forward. From Dikika's cut-marked bones to a quiet plate of cultured wagyu under soft restaurant lighting, the arc has bent but never broken. Fact 131. By the mid-2030s, methane-reducing seaweed supplements, primarily Asparagopsis taxiformis and related red algae strains, had been bred and scaled into pelletized feed additives distributed through major global feed companies. Cattle and certified low-emission supply chains in Ireland, Uruguay, and parts of the American Midwest showed enteric methane reductions averaging 30–82% depending on dosage and animal genetics. The resulting beef carried the same heme iron density, complete amino acid profile, and satisfying mouthfeel that once rewarded a successful persistence hunt across open savanna. Only the atmospheric cost had been quietly lowered, a modern refinement of the ancient bargain between human hunger and planetary limits. Fact 132. Around 2035–2040, precision fermentation expanded beyond heme and dairy proteins into full muscle protein analogs produced by filamentous fungi and precision-engineered yeast strains. Brands launched mycoprotein steaks and fungal ribeye, grown in large fermenters on sugar feedstocks derived from agricultural residues. Waste audits from households in Amsterdam, Austin, and Auckland began registering soft, fibrous remnants rather than calcified bone fragments. The texture, chewy yet yielding, with engineered intramuscular fat, recreated the sensory reward that had once driven Homo habilis to claim scavenged flesh 2.6 million years ago, now without any animal ever needing to walk or breathe. Fact 133. In the same time frame, small-scale home bioreactors, tabletop units the size of a large microwave, appeared on the consumer market in tech-forward cities. Early adopters in Seoul, San Francisco, and Shenzhen cultured small batches of ground, personalized meat from starter cell lines purchased online, adjusting fat content and flavor profiles via smartphone apps. Kitchen bins in these households contained almost no traditional animal remains, only spent nutrient pouches and biodegradable scaffolds. Yet the act of growing one's own protein echoed the oldest human ingenuity, taking control of the food supply, one small innovation at a time, just as the first hafted points improved the odds at Jesher Benat Yaakov 780,000 years earlier. Fact 134. Across sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia in the late 2030s, urban poultry value chains continued to densify. Battery cage and improved semi-intensive broiler systems supplied the majority of animal protein in rapidly growing secondary cities, Kampala, Lusaka, Chittagong, Surat. Chicken bones, small, brittle, often mechanically separated, piled in higher volumes in municipal waste than ever before, reflecting how the fastest-growing species became the default protein for the largest number of people. The nutritional payoff, lean muscle protein, accessible iron, low production footprint, mirrored the advantages that shifted early Homo sapiens towards smaller, more reliable game during the climatic stresses of 70,000 50,000 years ago. Fact 135. During this period, wilded or conservation-linked meat labels gained traction in parts of southern Africa, Australia, and the American West. Game ranches and community conservancies harvested surplus populations of springbok, kudu, impala, kangaroo, and bison under strict quotas. The meat was marketed as regenerative and biodiversity positive. Discarded bones from these cuts, long, slender, often bearing the clean cuts of skilled field dressing, appeared in specialty butcher cases and high-end restaurant waste. The practice quietly revived the selective hunting ethic visible in Natufian gazelle assemblages 15,000 years ago, now reframed through modern ecology and certification. Fact 136. By the early 2040s, cultured seafood had moved into mid-price supermarket ranges in coastal East Asian markets and parts of Europe. Grown salmon fillets, shrimp tails, and scallop adductor mussels, produced without nets, without bycatch, without ocean pens, sat beside wild-caught and farmed counterparts. Kitchen waste reflected the change: fewer fish vertebrae and crab shells, more clean trays from vacuum-packed cultured portions. The shift preserved the omega-3 fatty acids and delicate proteins that once sustained coastal groups at Clayse's river mouth 120,000 years ago, only now decoupled from fragile marine ecosystems. Fact 137. In the same years, gene-edited heat-tolerant cattle breeds, incorporating slick gene variants originally identified in Senepal and Criollo cattle, spread through tropical and subtropical beef herds in Brazil, Mexico, India, and northern Australia. These animals maintained productivity during extreme heat waves. Their meat retained the same nutrient density that had supported taller, more enduring Homo erectus bodies 1.8 million years ago. Bones from these lines looked identical to conventional beef bones in waste streams, yet the animals themselves carried a small genetic edit that helped them thrive where earlier generations would have struggled. Fact 138. Street food cultures in Latin America, anticuchos in Peru, corapan in Argentina, carne asada in Mexico, continued to thrive as urban populations swelled. Beef heart skewers, pork sausage sandwiches, and grilled flank cuts remained affordable, high-flavor ways to access animal protein. Discarded rib bones, vertebrae, and cartilage fragments accumulated around charcoal grills and were often collected for stock or pet food rendering. The communal act of eating hot meat together under streetlights preserved the same social warmth once shared around Gravettian mammoth bone fires 30,000 years ago. Fact 139. Around 2040-2045, full-stack cellular agriculture campuses, integrated facilities combining cell line banking, media production, bioreactors, scaffolding fabrication, and packaging, began operating at gigaton equivalent scale in selected regions. These campuses supplied bulk cultured mince and ground products to fast food chains and school systems. Waste from end consumers contained almost no skeletal material, only soft, compostable residues. Yet the protein delivered the same essential amino acids, B vitamins, and bioavailable iron that first fueled brain expansion in Homo heidelbergensis and early Homo sapiens. Fact 140. As we linger here in the stillness of this night in February 2026, knowing the decades ahead will bring wider bioreactor adoption, more precise genetic tweaks, deeper integration of microbial and fungal proteins, continued growth in poultry and insects in the global south, and gradual cultural shifts in the north, the long arc of meat in human life remains one of relentless adaptation. From the tentative opportunism of 3.4 million-year-old cut marks to the quiet efficiency of a 2040s vat-grown fillet. From the shared marrow that strengthens social bonds beside Olduvai hearths to the individually portioned cultured nugget heated in a microwave, the core impulse has stayed constant. Find, secure, transform, and share the densest possible nutrition so that bodies may endure, minds may grow, and communities may flourish. Fact 141. By the late 2030s and early 2040s, large-scale ocean-free aquaculture, salmon, shrimp, and whitefish grown entirely in land-based recirculating systems or saltwater bioreactors had become the dominant source of farmed seafood in coastal nations from Norway to Chile. These facilities recycled water through biofilters and UV treatment, producing fillets with the same omega-3 profiles and delicate texture that once required long trawls across fragile marine ecosystems. Kitchen waste in Oslo, Santiago, and Vancouver showed fewer fish vertebrae and tail bones, replaced by clean trays from vacuum-sealed cultured portions. The nutritional continuity, essential fatty acids for brain health, echoed the coastal foraging that sustained early Homo sapiens at Border Cave and Pinnacle Point more than 100,000 years earlier. Fact 142. Around 2040-2045, microbial single-cell protein from hydrogen-oxidizing bacteria, such as Cupriavitis necator strains, reached commercial maturity in facilities powered by green hydrogen from electrolysis. These colorless to pale powders, 70–80% protein by dry weight, complete amino acid profile, were extruded into mince, nuggets, and sausage textures, then flavored with yeast extracts and plant-derived heme. Household waste in Copenhagen, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo began registering soft, fibrous residues rather than calcified bones. The efficiency of turning renewable electricity and air into dense nutrition quietly mirrored the metabolic shortcut that first allowed smaller guts and larger brains in Homo erectus 1.8 million years ago. Fact 143. In the same period, personalized nutrition services expanded to include home-delivered cultured meat kits tailored to genetic markers for iron absorption, B12 metabolism, or saturated fat sensitivity. Users in tech-forward cities scanned saliva samples, received customized cell line subscriptions, and cultured small portions in countertop devices. Discarded nutrient pouches and scaffold remnants replaced traditional meat bones in these households. The personalization revived, in a high-tech form, the ancient trial and error of early hominins learning which scavenged organs best prevented night blindness or fatigue in lean seasons. Fact 144. Across much of sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia in the 2040s, small-scale chicken rearing, improved dual-purpose breeds and semi-scavenging systems remain the backbone of household protein security. Village-level flocks supplied eggs daily and meat sporadically. Small, brittle chicken bones continued to dominate local waste heaps, often collected for low-cost stock or fertilizer. The reliability of these birds, rapid turnover, low feed requirements, preserved the same adaptive logic that shifted Upper Paleolithic hunters towards smaller, more predictable game during the climatic volatility of 20,000–15,000 years ago. Fact 145. During this decade, rewilded megafauna meat from managed populations, bison in North America, red deer in Europe, springbok and eland in southern Africa, gained certification as ecosystem service products. Revenue from sustainable harvests funded habitat restoration. The meat carried the lean, gamey profile once prized by Gravettian hunters 30,000 years ago. Bones from these cuts, long, clean fractured, often marrow split, appeared in specialty butcher cases. The practice formed a gentle loop back to the selective hunting visible in Magdalenian reindeer assemblages, now guided by satellite-tracked migration data and population modeling. Fact 146. By the mid-2040s, cultured red meat products had achieved price parity with mid-range conventional beef in several high-income markets. Thick ribeye-style cuts, grown on edible plant scaffolds and matured in flavor bioreactors, were seared in restaurants and home kitchens. The Maillard crust, juice release, and intramuscular fat distribution matched tradition so closely that many consumers reported no sensory difference. Kitchen bins contained almost no skeletal material, only soft, compostable remnants, yet the pleasure remained anchored in the same primal reward circuitry that once lit up beside Alduin choppers 2 million years earlier. Fact 147. In parallel, insect farming scaled dramatically in tropical and subtropical zones. Black soldier fly larvae converted food waste streams into high-protein meal for human snacks and animal feed. Cricket farms in Thailand, Kenya, Mexico, and Vietnam supplied flour for bread, noodles, and energy bars. Chitin-rich exoskeletons, pulverized into fine meal, entered composting loops rather than landfills. The high bioavailability of iron, zinc, and complete proteins echoed the micronutrient advantages that first drew early Homo sapiens to organ meats and marrow during periods of nutritional stress. Fact 148. Around 2045–2050, gene-edited resilient livestock breeds, incorporating heat tolerance, disease resistance, and feed efficiency traits, spread through commercial herds in tropical and arid regions. Cattle, sheep, and goats carrying multiple CRISPR edits maintained productivity under rising temperatures and erratic rainfall. Their meat retained the nutrient density that had supported taller, more enduring bodies in Homo erectus. Bones from these animals looked indistinguishable from conventional ones in waste streams. Yet the small genetic changes helped preserve pastoral livelihoods in landscapes increasingly shaped by a warming climate. Fact 149. In urban centers across Latin America, Africa, and South Asia, street meat culture evolved with hybrid innovations. Grilled cultured chicken skewers, plant-based corapan patties blended with 20–30% cell-based pork insect flour empanadas. Charcoal grills still sizzled under night markets, discarded small chicken bones, composite food scraps, and occasional chitin dust accumulated around stalls. The social ritual sharing hot, spiced bites with neighbors under string lights preserved the same communal warmth once felt around Natufian gazelle fires 15,000 years ago, now adapted to new ingredients and new scarcities. Fact 150. As we rest here in the stillness of this February night in 2026, knowing the decades and centuries ahead will bring wider adoption of cellular, microbial, and insect proteins, deeper integration of low-emission livestock systems, continued growth in poultry and street meat cultures in the global south, gradual cultural redefinitions of what meat can be, and persistent human ingenuity in securing dense nutrition, the long arc remains one of quiet continuity. From the first opportunistic scrape of a sharp flake against bone 3.4 million years ago to the soft hum of a countertop bioreactor growing personalized fillet. From the shared marrow that bound small bands beside flickering hearths to the individually wrapped cultured nugget heated in a microwave, the impulse has endured. Find the most reliable source of complete protein, transform it, share it, remember its taste, and pass the knowledge forward so that life may continue. Fact 151. By the early 2040s, open-source cell culture starter kits had spread through maker communities and university biolabs across continents. Downloadable protocols, 3D printable bioreactor frames, and affordable media recipes allowed small cooperatives in Brazil, Indonesia, Kenya, and rural United States to grow their own ground meat batches from shared bovine or porcine cell lines. Kitchen waste in these settings contained spent nutrient cartridges and soft scaffold remnants rather than traditional bones. The act of culturing protein at home quietly revived the oldest human impulse toward self-reliance, once expressed by napping Alduin choppers 2.6 million years ago, now expressed through pipettes and sterile hoods. Fact 152. Around 2045-2050, ocean-sparing blue foods, cultured mussels, oysters, and abalone grown on land-based flow-through systems, entered mid-tier supermarket shelves in Japan, South Korea, Spain, and New Zealand. These products delivered the same briny umami, zinc, and omega-3 richness that once drew early coastal groups to shellfish middens at Clayse's river mouth 164,000 years ago. Waste streams showed fewer bivalve shells and more clean trays from vacuum-sealed portions. The decoupling of seafood from ocean health preserved a nutritional continuity while easing pressure on collapsing wild stocks. Fact 153. During this decade, black soldier fly larvae farming reached industrial maturity in humid tropical zones. Facilities in Ghana, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Colombia converted millions of tons of food and agricultural waste into larvae biomass annually. The resulting protein meal entered human-grade products, cricket larvae burgers, soldier fly energy bars, insect-fortified instant noodles. Fine chitin powder appeared in compost rather than bone fragments in waste. The closed-loop efficiency echoed the total utilization once practiced at 400,000-year-old Schöningen spear sites, where every part of a horse was claimed. Fact 154. In arid and semi-arid regions, Sahel, Horn of Africa, Rajasthan, northern Mexico, drought-resilient small ruminants, goats, sheep carrying heat tolerance and parasite resistance edits remained central to household economies. Meat from these animals, lean, iron-rich, often stewed with local spices, continued to appear sporadically on family tables and in village markets. Small rib and femur bones, cracked for marrow, still accumulated in household hearths. The continuity preserved the adaptive strategy that allowed pastoral groups to endure climatic shifts millennia earlier. Fact 155. By the late 2040s, flavor-matured cultured red meats, steaks, and roasts held in controlled humidity chambers with wood smoke vapor, yeast-derived Maillard compounds, and enzymatic aging achieved sensory profiles indistinguishable from dry-aged grass-finished beef in blind tastings. Restaurant waste contained almost no skeletal remains, only soft, compostable food scraps. Yet the deep, caramelized crust and tender bite still triggered the same primal satisfaction once felt beside roasting hearths in Gravettian mammoth bone shelters 30,000 years ago. Fact 156. In parallel, fungal mycelium-based whole-cut steaks, grown on edible scaffolds inoculated with mushroom mycelium and flavored with precision-fermented animal-free myoglobin, entered premium markets in Europe and East Asia. The fibrous texture, engineered marbling, and heme-driven color mimicked muscle so closely that chefs used them interchangeably with conventional cuts. Discarded remnants were soft and fungal rather than bony. The innovation quietly extended humanity's ancient partnership with fungi, from early mushroom foraging to modern precision fermentation, while delivering the protein once secured through spear and atlatl. Fact 157. Around 2050, global poultry production surpassed 150 million metric tons annually, driven by continued population growth in Asia and Africa. Improved genetics, automated climate-controlled sheds, and rapid 35-42-day grow-out cycles kept chicken as the most accessible animal protein. Small, fragile bones dominated municipal waste in cities from Manila to Nairobi to Karachi. The ubiquity of chicken reflected the same pragmatic shift towards smaller, more reliable prey that characterized the transition from megafauna to medium game at the end of the Pleistocene. Fact 158. In indigenous Amazonian and Andean communities, managed wild game, peccary, tapir, agouti, continued to supplement farmed chicken and pork. Sustainable harvest quotas, monitored by community rangers and satellite data, ensured population stability. Meat was smoked over low fires or salted for preservation. Bones cracked for marrow and boiled for broth followed patterns recognizable from Clovis and Monte Verde sites 13,000 years ago. The continuity reminded that even in a world of bioreactors and vertical farms, certain places still practice the oldest ways. Fact 159. By the mid-2050s, ambient temperature cultured products, formulations stable without refrigeration, using natural preservatives and dehydration, became common in humanitarian aid packages and remote area supply chains. These shelf-stable patties and strips delivered complete protein without cold chain dependence. Waste from relief distributions contained soft, dried remnants rather than bones. The innovation echoed the ancient practice of drying meat into charqui in the high Andes 5,000 years ago, now scaled to meet needs in climate-stressed regions. Fact 160. As we linger here in the deep quiet of this February night in 2026, knowing the century ahead will bring even more seamless integration of cellular, microbial, fungal, and insect proteins, wider adoption of low-emission and regenerative livestock, persistent reliance on poultry and street meat in growing cities of the global South, continued cultural and technological redefinitions of meat, and an enduring human ingenuity in securing nourishment, the arc reveals itself as one of gentle persistence. From the first uncertain scrape of stone against bone in the dawn of our lineage, to the soft click of a countertop bioreactor door closing on a personalized fillet. From the shared marrow that bound fragile bands beside flickering hearths to the individually portioned cultured nugget passed hand to hand at a family table, the core desire has never wavered. Find the surest path to dense, complete nutrition so that bodies may endure, minds may expand, communities may strengthen, and wonder may continue. Fact 161. By the early 2050s, modular micro-factory units for cellular agriculture had begun appearing in community centers, schools, and refugee settlements in regions affected by prolonged drought or conflict. These compact systems, shipping container-sized, powered by solar panels and small wind turbines, grew ground meat batches from shared open-source cell lines using recycled nutrient media derived from local food waste hydrolysates. Waste from these installations consisted almost entirely of soft, biodegradable cartridge remnants and spent scaffolds. The small-scale production revived in a decentralized form, the ancient household-level meat processing once practiced beside Natufian gazelle fires 15,000 years ago, now adapted to environments where conventional livestock could no longer thrive. Fact 162. Around 2050-2055, air protein from hydrogen-oxidizing bacteria reached gigaton equivalent scale in facilities powered entirely by surplus renewable electricity during off-peak hours. Colorless to pale biomass, 80–85% protein, fortified with B12 and iron, was extruded, textured, and flavored into patties, sausages, and mince that mimicked conventional products so closely that blind taste panels often failed to distinguish them. Household waste in Reykjavik, Perth, Santiago, and parts of northern China began registering soft, fibrous food scraps rather than any calcified remains. The process turned air, water, and green energy into complete nutrition, quietly echoing the metabolic efficiency that first freed metabolic resources for larger brains in Homo erectus nearly 2 million years earlier. Fact 163. In this same period, cultured organ meats, liver pâté, bone marrow emulsion, sweetbreads, and kidney emerged as premium cultured lines. Grown from specialized progenitor cells on edible scaffolds and matured with enzymatic flavor enhancers, these products delivered the dense micronutrient profiles, vitamin A, folate, copper, heme iron, that once made organ meats prized by early hunters. Kitchen bins in high-end households contained almost no traditional organ remnants, only soft, compostable waste. Yet the nutritional payoff remained identical to the organ first eating patterns visible in many Upper Paleolithic faunal assemblages. Fact 164. Across much of sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia in the 2050s, village-level poultry micro-farms, using solar-powered automated feeders and improved biosecure breeds, continued to supply the majority of household animal protein. Eggs appeared daily, meat sporadically. Small chicken bones, often cracked for marrow in traditional stews, still accumulated in household hearths and local waste piles. The reliability of these systems preserved the pragmatic shift towards smaller, faster reproducing protein sources that characterized the transition from Pleistocene megafauna to Holocene medium game. Fact 165. By the mid-2050s, ecosystem-linked game meat from rewilding projects, bison in the American Great Plains, red deer in reforested European uplands, springbok and oryx in southern African conservancies, carried blockchain-verified traceability from harvest to plate. The lean mineral-rich meat supported habitat restoration funds. Discarded bones, long, clean fractured marrow split, appeared in specialty butcher cases and restaurant waste. The practice formed a modern echo of the selective hunting ethic seen in 17,000-year-old Magdalenian reindeer drives, now guided by drone monitoring, population genomics, and carbon credit accounting. Fact 166. During this decade, fungal whole muscle cuts, mycelium steaks, and fillets grown on edible scaffolds with embedded precision-fermented myoglobin and fat globules achieved sensory parity with conventional red meat in large-scale blind tastings. Chefs seared them exactly as they would grass-finished ribeye. Waste consisted of soft, fungal remnants rather than bone. The innovation extended humanity's ancient symbiosis with fungi, from Paleolithic mushroom foraging to modern precision fermentation, while delivering the protein and fat once secured through atlatl and spear. Fact 167. Around 2055-2060, global insect protein inclusion crossed 5–8% of total human-grade protein supply in middle-income nations. Cricket, soldier fly, and mealworm powders were routinely blended into staple foods: maize porridge in East Africa, rice noodles in Southeast Asia, flatbreads in South Asia. Fine chitin residues entered composting systems. The high bioavailability of zinc, iron, and complete proteins mirrored the micronutrient advantages that once drew early Homo sapiens to marrow and organ meats during periods of scarcity. Fact 168. In indigenous Arctic and subarctic communities, Inuit, Yupik, Sami, Chukchi, managed wild harvests of caribou, seal, walrus, and reindeer continued alongside imported cultured and plant hybrid products. Vacuum-sealed caribou haunches and aged muktuk still supplied vitamin C, omega-3s, and dense calories in environments hostile to conventional agriculture. Bones cracked for marrow and boiled for broth followed patterns recognizable from Upper Paleolithic sites. The continuity reminded that certain ecologies still demanded the oldest nutritional strategies. Fact 169. By the late 2050s, zero-waste cultured meat campuses, integrated facilities recycling 99% of water, media components, and Co2 supplied bulk protein to institutional buyers, schools, hospitals, military. These campuses produced ground and shredded products at costs below mid-range conventional meat. End consumer waste contained almost no skeletal material, only soft, closed-loop remnants. The total utilization ethic quietly recalled the marrow-cracking precision visible at 700,000-year-old Atapuerca butchery sites, now achieved through filtration membranes and microbial recycling. Fact 170. As we rest here in the deep stillness of this February night in 2026, knowing the century and beyond will bring even more seamless blending of cellular, microbial, fungal, insect, and low-emission livestock proteins, wider adoption of decentralized micro-factories and personal bioreactors, persistent reliance on poultry, street meat, and small ruminants in the global south, continued redefinition of meat through technology and culture, and an enduring human creativity in securing nourishment. The long arc reveals itself as one of gentle, relentless adaptation. From the first tentative scrape of sharp stone against bone 3.4 million years ago to the soft click of a modular bioreactor lid closing on a community-grown fillet. From the shared marrow that strengthened fragile bands beside Alduin hearths to the individually portioned cultured patty passed hand to hand at a family table in a warming world. The core desire has never wavered. Find the surest path to dense, complete nutrition so that bodies may endure, minds may grow, communities may strengthen, and the quiet wonder of being alive may continue. Fact 171. By the mid-2050s to early 2060s, community-scale cultured meat cooperatives had become common in secondary cities and peri-urban zones of middle-income countries. Lusaka, Cochabamba, Surabaya, Ibadan. These cooperatives pooled resources to operate shared 502,000-liter bioreactors, growing mince and sausage from open-source porcine or avian cell lines fed on local sugar cane molasses or cassava hydrolysate. Waste from these operations consisted almost entirely of soft, biodegradable nutrient cartridge remnants and scaffold fibers. The distributed model revived in a cooperative form, the ancient band-level sharing of scavenged game visible at Kanjura, South 2 million years ago, now adapted to environments where land for traditional livestock had become too scarce or too costly. Fact 172. Around 2060, ambient temperature shelf-stable cultured patties, formulated with natural antimicrobial peptides, dehydration, and vacuum sealing, had become standard components of emergency food stockpiles maintained by international agencies and national governments. These products delivered complete protein without cold chain dependence and remained edible for 1836 months. Waste from relief distributions contained only dry, compostable scraps rather than any skeletal material. The innovation echoed the ancient practice of sun-drying and smoking meat into charqui or jerky across the high Andes and North American plains thousands of years earlier, now scaled to feed populations displaced by flood, drought, or conflict in a warming world. Fact 173. During this period, fungal marbled whole cuts, mycelium-based fillets engineered with embedded precision fermented fat droplets and myoglobin, achieved widespread adoption in institutional catering, hospitals, universities, corporate cafeterias across Europe, East Asia, and parts of North America. Chefs treated them identically to conventional beef or pork. Discarded remnants were soft, fungal, and rapidly compostable rather than bony. The texture and flavor profile still triggered the same primal satisfaction once felt beside roasting hearths in Gravettian mammoth bone shelters 33,000 to 22,000 years ago, only now produced without any animal ever needing to graze or breathe. Fact 174. In the Sahel, Horn of Africa, and parts of the Indian subcontinent in the 2060s, gene-edited climate-resilient goats and sheep, carrying multiple stacked edits for heat tolerance, parasite resistance, and improved feed conversion, remain central to pastoral and agro-pastoral livelihoods. Meat from these animals, lean, mineral-dense, often stewed with millet or sorghum, continued to appear on family tables and in weekly markets. Small rib and femur bones, cracked for marrow in traditional cooking pots, still accumulated in household waste. The genetic tweaks preserved the adaptive strategy that allowed small ruminants to thrive where larger cattle struggled during earlier Holocene aridification phases. Fact 175. By the late 2060s, personal flavor cultured products, allowing end users to adjust intramuscular fat percentage, heme intensity, and secondary flavor compounds via app-controlled maturation chambers, had become a premium consumer category in affluent urban markets. Home bioreactors produced customized ribeye-style steaks or ground blends tailored to individual taste profiles or nutritional needs. Kitchen waste contained spent media pouches and soft scaffolds rather than traditional bones. The personalization quietly extended the ancient trial and error of early hominins' learning, which scavenged organs best addressed seasonal deficiencies, now achieved through digital interfaces and cellular precision. Fact 176. Around 2070, global insect protein supply chains had matured to the point where soldier fly, cricket, and mealworm meals were routinely included in blended staple foods. Fortified maize flour in East Africa, rice blends in Southeast Asia, sorghum porridge in West Africa, at levels reaching 10–20% of total protein in school meal and humanitarian programs. Fine chitin residues entered soil amendment loops. The high zinc, iron, and complete protein content mirrored the micronutrient advantages that once drew Upper Paleolithic hunters to organ meats and marrow during lean periods. Fact 177. In indigenous and traditional communities across the Arctic, Amazon basin, and high Andes during this era, managed wild and semi-domesticated harvests, caribou, peccary, llama, alpaca, continued alongside increasing integration of shelf-stable cultured and air protein products. Vacuum-sealed wild meat and aged traditional preparations still supplied key micronutrients in environments hostile to conventional agriculture. Bones cracked for marrow and boiled for broth followed patterns recognizable from Clovis-era sites 13,000 years ago. The blend of old and new preserved nutritional resilience in places where global supply chains remained distant or unreliable. Fact 178. By the early 2070s, closed-loop urban food campuses, vertical farms integrated with insect modules, fungal fermenters, and small-scale cultured meat bioreactors, had become standard in water-scarce megacities from Dubai to Mexico City to Delhi. These campuses recycled nearly 100% of water and organic waste into protein. End consumer waste contained only soft, rapidly degradable remnants. The total resource utilization ethic quietly recalled the marrow-cracking precision visible at 700,000-year-old Atapuerca butchery sites, now achieved through membrane filtration, microbial recycling, and solar-powered circulation. Fact 179. Around 2075–2080, cultured heritage breed lines, cell cultures derived from rare or extinct breeds, e.g., aurochs proxies, heritage pigs, ancient cattle landraces, became available as luxury and conservation products. The meat carried flavor profiles echoing pre-industrial livestock. Waste consisted of soft scaffolds rather than bones. The revival of lost genetic diversity through cellular means formed a gentle loop back to the domestication centers of 10,000, 8,000 years ago, now preserving biodiversity not in living herds but in frozen cell banks and bioreactor vats. Fact 180. As we rest here in the deep stillness of this February night in 2026, knowing the distant future will bring even more decentralized micro-factories, ambient stable cultured foods, wider fungal and insect integration, continued reliance on resilient small livestock in marginal lands, persistent street meat and communal traditions in growing cities, and an ever deeper redefinition of meat through technology, culture, and necessity, the long arc remains one of quiet, relentless continuity. From the first uncertain scrape of sharp stone against bone 3.4 million years ago to the soft chime of a community bioreactor completing its cycle. From the shared marrow that bound fragile bands beside flickering Alduin hearths to the individually portioned cultured heritage ribi passed hand to hand at a family table in a very different world, the core desire has never wavered. Find the surest path to dense, complete nutrition so that bodies may endure, minds may expand, communities may strengthen, and the quiet wonder of being alive may carry forward through whatever landscapes await. Fact 181. By the early 2060s, distributed cellular agriculture networks had begun to form in clusters of mid-sized cities across Southeast Asia, West Africa, and Latin America. These networks linked dozens of 1,000, 5,000-liter bioreactors through shared digital cell line libraries and nutrient media recipes optimized for local carbohydrate surpluses, cassava in Nigeria, rice bran in Vietnam, maize in Bolivia. Households and small restaurants received weekly deliveries of fresh cultured mince or shredded chicken-style product. Kitchen waste contained only soft, rapidly degradable nutrient cartridge remnants and scaffold fibers. The networked model quietly revived the ancient band-level reciprocity visible at 2-million-year-old Kanjura South sites, now scaled through cloud-coordinated logistics and open-source biotechnology. Fact 182. Around 2065, ambient stable protein bricks, compressed, dehydrated cultured meat blocks formulated with natural humectants and antimicrobial peptides, had become standard long shelf life items in disaster preparedness stockpiles and remote mining camps. These bricks could be rehydrated with water into patties or stewed chunks and remain safe for 3-5 years without refrigeration. Waste from relief or expedition use consisted of dry, compostable packaging rather than any skeletal material. The format echoed the ancient Charqui and pemmican traditions of the high Andes and North American plains thousands of years earlier, now engineered for a century in which supply chain fragility had become a recurring fact of life. Fact 183. During this period, mycelium hybrid steaks, grown from fungal scaffolds seeded with small percentages, 5–15% of cultured animal myoblasts, achieved broad acceptance in mid-tier restaurants and institutional kitchens across Europe, East Asia, and urban centers of the global South. The hybrid approach reduced cell culture media costs while preserving the familiar red meat color, heme-driven flavor, and tender bite. Discarded remnants were soft, fungal, and compostable rather than bony. The combination extended humanity's ancient partnership with fungi, from Paleolithic foraging to modern precision engineering, while delivering the protein once secured through spear-thrown kills at Schöningen 400,000 years ago. Fact 184. In arid and semi-arid pastoral zones, Sahel, Kalahari margins, Thar Desert, northern Mexico, gene-edited ultra-resilient, small ruminants carrying stacked edits for drought tolerance, parasite resistance, water use efficiency, and methane reduction continued to anchor household protein security well into the 2060s. Meat from these goats and sheep, lean, iron-rich, often slow-cooked with local grains, remained a weekly or monthly staple. Small rib and femur bones, cracked for marrow in clay pots, still accumulated in household waste. The genetic refinements preserved the adaptive strategy that allowed caprines to thrive through Holocene aridification phases, now fine-tuned for a world of rising temperatures and erratic rainfall. Fact 185. By the late 2060s, sensory customized cultured products, allowing end users to dial in desired levels of intramuscular fat, collagen cross-linking, and secondary aroma compounds via maturation chamber settings, had become a mainstream premium category in affluent urban markets from Singapore to Dubai to Toronto. Home or small business bioreactors produced tailored ribeye-style cuts or ground blends. Kitchen waste contained spent media pouches and soft scaffolds rather than traditional bones. The customization quietly extended the ancient trial and error of early hominins discovering which scavenged organs best countered seasonal deficiencies, now mediated through digital interfaces and cellular precision. Fact 186. Around 2070, insect protein inclusion had reached 15–25% of total human-grade protein supply in many middle and lower middle-income countries. Soldier fly, cricket, and mealworm meals were routinely blended into fortified staples, maize ugali in East Africa, rice porridge in Southeast Asia, sorghum injera in the Horn of Africa, at levels that made them nutritionally invisible to most eaters. Fine chitin powder entered soil amendment and fertilizer loops. The high bioavailability of zinc, iron, B12, and complete proteins mirrored the micronutrient advantages that once drew upper Paleolithic hunters to marrow and organ meats during lean seasons. Fact 187. In indigenous and traditional communities across the Arctic, Amazon Basin, High Andes, and Kalahari margins during this era, managed wild and semi-domesticated harvests, caribou, peccary, llama, alpaca, springbok, continued alongside increasing integration of shelf-stable cultured mints, air protein powders, and insect-fortified staples. Vacuum-sealed wild meat and aged traditional preparations still supplied key micronutrients in environments hostile to conventional agriculture. Bones cracked for marrow and boiled for broth followed patterns recognizable from Clovis-era sites 13,000 years ago. The blend of ancestral foods with modern alternatives preserved nutritional resilience in places where global supply chains remained intermittent or cost-prohibitive. Fact 188. By the early 2070s, fully closed-loop urban food campuses, vertical farms integrated with insect modules, fungal fermenters, microbial protein towers, and small to medium cultured meat bioreactors, had become standard infrastructure in water-scarce and land-constrained megacities from Dubai to Mexico City to Delhi to Jakarta. These campuses recycled nearly 100% of water, CO2, and organic waste into protein. End consumer waste contained only soft, rapidly degradable remnants. The total resource utilization ethic quietly recalled the marrow-cracking precision visible at 700,000-year-old Atapuerca butchery sites, now achieved through membrane filtration, microbial recycling, solar-powered circulation, and AI-optimized nutrient flows. Fact 189. Around 2075–2085, heritage proxy cultured lines, cell cultures derived from ancient or extinct breed genomes reconstructed via paleogenomics aurochs like cattle, heritage pigs, wild boar proxies, became available as both luxury gastronomy items and conservation archives. The meat carried flavor profiles echoing pre-industrial livestock. Waste consisted of soft scaffolds rather than bones. The revival of lost genetic diversity through cellular means formed a gentle loop back to the multiple domestication centers of 10,000, 8,000 years ago, now preserving biodiversity not in living herds but in frozen cell banks, digital sequence libraries, and bioreactor vats. Fact 190. As we rest here in the deep stillness of this February night in 2026, knowing the distant future will bring even more decentralized micro-factories and personal bioreactors, wider adoption of air protein and fungal hybrids, deeper integration of insect meals into everyday staples, continued reliance on resilient small livestock and street meat traditions in the global south, persistent redefinition of meat through layered technologies and cultural adaptations, and an enduring human creativity in securing nourishment under whatever constraints the planet imposes, the long arc remains one of quiet, relentless continuity. From the first tentative scrape of sharp stone against bone 3.4 million years ago to the soft chime of a community bioreactor completing its cycle in a drought-affected peri-urban neighborhood. From the shared marrow that bound fragile bands beside flickering Alduin hearths to the individually portioned cultured heritage ribi passed hand to hand at a family table in a very different world, the core desire has never wavered. Find the surest path to dense, complete nutrition so that bodies may endure, minds may expand, communities may strengthen, and the quiet wonder of being alive may carry forward through whatever landscapes, climates, and technologies await. Fact 191. By the mid-2060s to early 2070s, hyper-local cultured protein pods, compact, solar-powered units the size of a small refrigerator, had become standard fixtures in rural schools, health clinics, and women's cooperatives across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and parts of Central America. These pods grew small daily batches of ground, chicken-style, or beef-style product from shared cell lines fed on locally grown cassava, maize, or sweet potato starch. Families collected portions weekly. Kitchen waste contained only soft, rapidly degradable nutrient cartridge remnants and scaffold fibers. The hyper-local model quietly revived the ancient household-level sharing of scavenged game visible at 2-million-year-old Kandjura South sites, now powered by sunlight and open-source biotechnology in regions where conventional meat supply chains had become unreliable or unaffordable. Fact 192. Around 2070-2075, zero-input microbial protein towers, using only atmospheric CO2, nitrogen, trace minerals from recycled wastewater, and sunlight-driven electrolysis for hydrogen, reached commercial scale in arid regions from Namibia to the Atacama to western Rajasthan. Colorless to pale biomass, 85–90% protein, was textured and flavored into shelf-stable strips, patties, and powders. Waste from end use contained only dry, compostable packaging rather than any skeletal material. The process turned air, water, and sunlight directly into complete nutrition, quietly mirroring the metabolic shortcut that first freed resources for larger brains in Homo erectus nearly 2 million years earlier, now achieved through synthetic biology in landscapes too dry for traditional agriculture. Fact 193. During this period, full-spectrum cultured organ blends, liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and bone marrow emulsions grown together in layered bioreactors, emerged as specialized nutritional supplements for vulnerable populations, elderly, pregnant women, children in food-insecure zones. These blends delivered concentrated heme iron, vitamin A, folate, copper, and B12 without requiring animal slaughter or long-distance transport. Waste consisted of soft, compostable remnants rather than organ bones or tissue scraps. The targeted nutrition echoed the organ-first eating patterns visible in many Upper Paleolithic faunal assemblages, now precisely engineered for modern deficiencies in micronutrient-poor diets. Fact 194. In arid pastoral zones, Sahel, Kalahari margins, Thar Desert, northern Mexico, gene-edited ultra-resilient small ruminants carrying stacked edits for extreme drought tolerance, parasite resistance, water use efficiency, methane reduction, and heat shock protein expression continued to anchor household protein security well into the 2070s. Meat from these goats and sheep, lean, mineral-dense, often slow-cooked with local grains, remained a weekly or monthly staple. Small rib and femur bones, cracked for marrow in clay pots, still accumulated in household waste. The genetic refinements preserved the adaptive strategy that allowed caprines to thrive through Holocene aridification phases, now fine-tuned for a world of rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, and lengthening dry seasons. Fact 195. By the late 2070s, sensory heritage cultured lines, cell cultures reconstructed from paleogenomic data of extinct or ancient breeds, aurochs proxies, heritage pigs, wild boar, long-extinct cattle landraces, have become both luxury gastronomy items and living genetic archives. The meat carried flavor profiles echoing pre-industrial livestock. Waste consisted of soft scaffolds rather than bones. The revival of lost genetic diversity through cellular means formed a gentle loop back to the multiple domestication centers of 10,000, 8,000 years ago, now preserving biodiversity not in living herds but in frozen cell banks, digital sequence libraries, and bioreactor vats scattered across research institutes and premium kitchens. Fact 196. Around 2080, insect protein had become so seamlessly integrated into global staple foods that most consumers in middle and lower middle-income countries consumed 20–35% of their daily protein from soldier, fly, cricket, or mealworm sources without noticing. Blended into maize ugali, rice noodles, sorghum injera, cassava fufu, and wheat chapati. Fine chitin powder entered soil amendment and fertilizer loops at scale. The high zinc, iron, B12, and complete protein content mirrored the micronutrient advantages that once drew Upper Paleolithic hunters to marrow and organ meats during lean seasons, now delivered through scalable, low-land use farming. Fact 197. In indigenous and traditional communities across the Arctic, Amazon Basin, High Andes, Kalahari margins, and Pacific Islands during this era, managed wild and semi-domesticated harvests, caribou, peccary, llama, alpaca, springbok, seal, tuna proxies, continued alongside full integration of shelf-stable cultured mints, air protein powders, insect-fortified staples, and personal flavor cultured cuts. Vacuum-sealed wild meat and aged traditional preparations still supplied key micronutrients in environments hostile to conventional agriculture. Bones cracked for marrow and boiled for broth followed patterns recognizable from Clovis-era sites 13,000 years ago. The blend of ancestral foods with layered modern alternatives preserved nutritional resilience in places where global supply chains remained intermittent, costly, or ecologically inappropriate. Fact 198. By the early 2080s, fully autonomous food island urban campuses, vertically stacked systems combining solar-powered vertical farms, insect modules, fungal fermenters, microbial protein towers, closed-loop cultured meat bioreactors, and water recycling desalination, had become self-sustaining protein hubs in water-scarce and land-constrained megacities from Dubai to Mexico City to Delhi to Jakarta to Lagos. These campuses recycled nearly 100% of water, CO2, and organic waste into protein. End consumer waste contained only soft, rapidly degradable remnants. The total resource utilization ethic quietly recalled the marrow-cracking precision visible at 700,000-year-old Atapuerca butchery sites, now achieved through membrane filtration, microbial recycling, solar-powered circulation, AI-optimized nutrient flows, and complete system autonomy. Fact 199. Around 2090–2100, post-animal meat had become the default in most high-income and many middle-income urban settings. Cultured, air-derived, fungal hybrid, insect-fortified, or blended products that delivered the same nutritional profile, flavor memory, and cultural familiarity without requiring the raising or slaughter of traditional livestock. Waste streams in these cities contained almost no skeletal material, only soft, compostable, rapidly cycling residues. Yet the deep satisfaction of biting into a hot, juicy patty or a tender cultured steak still lit up the same primal reward circuitry that once responded to roasted marrow beside Alduin choppers 2 million years earlier. Fact 200, and so we reach this quiet milestone, 200 facts laid down like smooth river stones across an immense span of time. From the very first tentative cut marks on a goat like bone indica 3.4 million years ago, through every spear thrust, every herd drive, every spit roast, every stockyard line, every bioreactor swirl, every shared bite under starlight or streetlight, to this moment where protein arrives in forms our ancestors could scarcely imagine yet would instantly recognize as nourishment. The arc has been one of relentless, gentle adaptation. Meat in all its forms has never been merely food. It has been fuel for migration, glue for social bonds, marker of status, currency of ritual, bridge across scarcity, catalyst for thought, and quiet companion through every age of our becoming. Whatever shapes it takes tomorrow, whether vat-grown, air-grown, insect-grown, fungal-grown, or something yet unnamed, the essence remains. We take what the world offers, transform it, share it, remember its taste, and pass the knowledge forward so that life may continue, minds may wonder, and the long human story may breathe on. Here we pause at last, 200 facts complete, each one resting beside the others in the same tranquil bed. The first scavengers, the spear throwers, the herders, the butchers, the bioreactor keepers, the community sharers, they stand together now in the same gentle shadow, their hands having touched the same essential substance across every age. The night is vast and tender, holding every echo, the hesitant first cut into marrow, the crackle of a reindeer fire in Magdalenian dusk, the sizzle of goat skewers under Dhaka streetlights, the faint chime of a bioreactor cycle completion in the same soft hush. This has been our long, calm journey through the history of the first hunt, the first taste of meat, and every way we have carried that moment forward. Thank you for drifting here with me tonight. If this quiet story has helped you relax, fall asleep, or simply wander pleasantly through time, please consider subscribing to Sleepy History Past for more long, soothing journeys into the past. Leave a comment below, tell me where you are watching from tonight, whether it's a quiet room in Nolamary, somewhere in Kulna Division, or anywhere else across the world. Your words help others find these sleepy places too. Rest now. Let the echoes fade gently into dreams. Sleep well. Good night.